Where did I get the other background? Mm-mm. Hey everyone. Actually did not realize I was live, so I must have pushed the button before realizing it. Today is going to be an open forum, so I'm inviting everyone to come in if you want to. And so, okay, now I got this. Hold on just a second. I've got extra noise going on here. Okay, so hold on one second. I'm going to share the link. Just trying to get this all set up. I was trying to get it set up before, but I thought something seems strange here. Okay, so here you go. That's the link to join. But before you do that, I've got a little opener that I'm going to set up in all of my videos. This is my new video opening, and I'm going to modify it with additional guests sometimes. And so we're going to do that. All right. Okay, back to the chat. So that's my 2 minutes. So wholesome. Yes, it is. It is quite wholesome. So thank you so much. Digital Gnosis. Oh, look who's here. Okay, now we've got a couple people to join us. There they are. Hey. Nathan and V. Actually, I was thinking I might change my little opener, and I had all Christians in that, but now I'm thinking I need to add, for sure, since Nathan's been on my channel a whole bunch of times, I think I might have to have a heathen section.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, so, I was thinking, you've got to use a flattering picture though, right? It can't be a bad one.
Yeah, I was trying to find the pictures that people post of themselves, because that's usually the one that they like. So that's one idea. So what are you guys up to?
I think V's just about to make some food, and I've just let me just make sure that the microphone's set up right.
I can hear you pretty well. Let me ask you, I see on your shirt it says grumpy. Is that what I see it says? Am I reading that right?
Yes,
Grumpy Sprout.
V got me this as a Christmas jumper, so.
Oh, you call a sweater a jumper?
Yeah. And then she's also written Team Grumpy Sprout on my whiteboard as well.
That's sweet. That's nice. So what should we talk about today? I just decided I just do a completely open forum. And so those of you who just are joining in the chat, I put down the link if people want to join. So I'm going to post the link again. So Nathan's been on here a few times.
Yeah, I was planning on mostly just lurking, like if other people were coming on, just like lurking and listening in, but happy to talk.
Yeah, I was told Sal Cordova, he said he did want to come on today, so I sent him a link too, and I sent Sentinel Apologetics a link because he wanted to come on yesterday. But Sentinel's time right now, I think he's 13 hours ahead of us, so that might not happen. So did you happen to catch the conversation I had yesterday with Sal Cordova?
I didn't know. I watched the William Lane Craig on Unbelievable.
How'd that go?
It was interesting, mostly because he said some things as well that were like about the virus coming from a lab, but he said them with such confidence that it was kind of I thought that could be disconcerting if you're a Christian and you look to like William Lane Craig for like confidence. And he's speaking, about various arguments with in a particular way, and then he's just asserting, the virus comes from a lab in the same way, which that could be like, oh, hang on a second, that's a bit of a wild claim for him to make, but it was overall a good stream, I thought, and I always like listening to him. Like, he articulates himself very well, and
yeah, he does. Vekl's here, even though he's on the road, I guess. So how are you, Vekl?
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we sure can.
we can.
Oh, okay. I'm on the road, so I don't know if my signal be kind of choppy.
No, I can definitely hear you. I don't know if you saw my opening, but I had a picture of you and G-Man as part of in one of the slides.
Oh, you did? Oh, I'm gonna have to go back and look.
Yeah, I took your idea of creating an opening and I made up one. I created an opening, then I went into YouTube and I found some music that I could put on it. And so, but I'm going to change it. I'm going to actually change it with the same music, but I'm going to add Nathan and a few other people that talk to a lot. I have the heathens right at the end.
I can't wait to see it.
Kidding. I don't really think Nathan's a heathen. So yeah, William Lane Craig, I think he's probably the strongest debater that we have on the Christian side. I wouldn't want to go up against him if I were an atheist. It's like I wouldn't want to go up against Christopher Hitchens as a Christian. So
right. Yeah, I think he's an interesting one because on certain points he's really, really good, but I think this is the problem with apologetics in general, is that apologists try to cover so many topics that you just can't possibly be an expert in all of them. And so, like, I see him in some areas saying some really good and interesting stuff, and then in others, I'm almost sort of like shocked that he can be so intelligent and insightful on the one hand, and then say such wrong things about other things in other areas. And it'd be good to see him in having more like conversations with people as like a human, maybe at this point in his career, rather than just like the debate format and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought.
Yeah, I decided I don't really like doing debates. I've decided to. Modern Day Debate wanted me to come on one in a couple, like actually right around now, and I just sort of decided, I don't know. I don't think that changes. I think what it is people kind of dig their heels in. So when they watch a debate, they're rooting for the side that they're on, and it doesn't really matter what the arguments are.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, I definitely much prefer like conversations. I don't know if you saw, I was on Ask Cliff's channel on Monday as well.
No, I didn't. I don't think I know Ask Cliff.
Cliff, what's that? Connectly or something. He goes like on campuses a lot and preaches and does that sort of thing.
Oh, he's a Christian?
Yeah.
Interesting. So what happened? Did he convert you?
Honestly, it was one of I mean, I watched someone else did a review of that today that I watched, and it's quite bad in the sense of like I think they've really struggled to make any coherent points. Really, they kept kind of saying things that weren't really arguments at all, and then jumping from one thing to the next. And I ended up making a lot of their case for them, and it was very kind of incoherent in the end, and not. I mean, they were nice and everything, which was good, but it wasn't. And maybe productive. Maybe someone will get something out of it, but I don't think that they did a very good job of making their case.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what is their focus to make the case? Do they focus on the resurrection, or what do they?
I don't know that they focus on any one particular thing, but it seems like their style of apologetics involves sort of making a lot of rhetorical points that sound rhetorically good. So like just saying something like, well, you know, when a deer dies, when a lion eats a deer, on atheism, that there's nothing wrong about that, and we should all be. They'll just say things like that, which isn't really like an argument. But well, they're not even really making the moral argument though. They're just like saying things, and then you'll be like, oh well, what do you mean by that? Do you mean like that goodness is grounded in God's nature, or in some kind is like an idea in God's mind or something, or like, and you'll try and you'll. Like this is how the conversation went. Like they say these things, so I try and like understand what they meant by it, so as I could address what they think. But then they'd kind of go and just move on to something else. Well, you know, we need physical evidence. Then what do you do with the physical? And it's not even clear to me. Then I'm like, well, what do you even mean by physical evidence? Like, so it wasn't very like coherent as a discussion overall.
Yeah. Well, I also saw you were interacting with Braxton Hunter, and I saw he made a video that's called atheists just want to sin, or something, or something like that. It had to do with atheists and sinning, and he was going to talk about it. And I listened to about probably the first 10 or 15 minutes of his video, and I kind of got the gist of it, which was, if you become an atheist and you were raised a Christian, and then suddenly you start being thinking that things like abortion is acceptable and those kind of things, if you changed your political opinions to loosen up on prostitution and those sorts of things, then maybe your values are being impacted by your atheism. And so that was, I think that's the key point. And I don't know if you saw that, or I think you were interacting with him.
Yeah. So it's worth saying, like, so he made a video that's like 10 questions to, not to stump atheists. That was what I called it. It was like 10 questions for atheists or something. And I made a video one evening when I was kind of bored, just going through it and talking. Like it wasn't real. I don't even think my responses are that good or well thought through, in all honesty. But so he's making these response videos where he's collecting people making responses to him and addressing them. And like some of the stuff he says is valid for sure. I think there's problems overall with how he's interpreting it. Like I think he's got a blind spot when it comes to. So for example, he wants to exempt himself from. He wants to say, well, here's what some apologists do. They go 10 questions that atheists can't answer. And they said, well, I'm not doing that, but here's 10 questions atheists can't answer. Or say, Christians will say that atheists just want to sin. Can you see that? And he's like, but I'm not saying that you just want to sin, but I'm kind of like connoting it with the language that I'm using and stuff. And I get that, like, he isn't explicitly saying it in the same way that some Christians might, but I do think he's like sort of smuggling it in there with as like a connotation of, or it would be entailed by Christianity being true, which is what he thinks and wants to say as well. And there's all sorts of issues. So like firstly, my critique of him isn't particularly relevant in the first place, but then the way that he addresses some of the things that I'm responding to him with don't make much sense as well. So like he can't see why what I'm getting at with some of the objections I raised. So like for example, one of the things I said was, well, why is prostitution wrong anyway? And I've raised, several kind of questions, but rather than answering them, he goes and says, well, like, if you're an atheist, then you're a moral subjectivist. Well, I'm not a moral subjectivist, I'm a moral realist. So then like for 15 minutes, he rants about moral subjectivism, which has absolutely nothing to do with what I believe or what I think, or so it's just completely redundant and pointless.
So he was responding to you by saying you're a moral subjectivist. Is that what I'm getting?
Well, no, he
responds to you, or
specifically responding to me. He then says, well, if you're an atheist, you think this. So he builds up a straw man and then tears down that straw man. But it isn't, that's not what I believe. I don't think that my critique was good. And I think he could criticize it properly. But I don't think that he does a good job critiquing my critique, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does. I'm going to try to look up this work that I've done on millennials. And I hope I have it in here. Okay. So I don't have the research right in front of me. Shoot, I'm gonna have to dig it up. So here's what I found. I actually isolated, I think I mentioned this before on my channel, but I went to the world value surveys, and I'm working on a research study, a real one, like an academic study, not something for my blog. Sure. But I isolated the United States because we have a lot of people, and it seemed like a good country to isolate. I isolated data from the United States, and I identified different generations of people, like my generation, Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, and the boomers. And I looked at whether there were differences in people's beliefs or attitudes towards things like abortion and suicide and euthanasia and just all of those different political hot button issues. And I found a significant difference. I found that younger people are much more open to prostitution, abortion, euthanasia than people in my generation or the boomers. And so values are changing. And then I actually also isolated whether or not they believe in God, because that's also in the world values data. And I found a significant difference. Again, younger people were not saying that as much. And so I see these kind of things do correspond, the belief in God and being open to those things. So what do you guys think about that? I don't know, Vekl, if you want to chime in here too, but.
Yeah, if you want to come in, Vekl, because I've said a bit already. I can not very well.
Sure.
It sounds like you're at the bottom of a well, and we're.
You might fix that. We were able to hear you before. I think if you held the phone, I think you probably have a phone. So if you hold the phone maybe closer to your face.
Which is illegal in the UK for the risks.
Oh, maybe that's a problem. Maybe you don't want to hold the phone. Oh, he dropped off. Darn.
I mean, on that point, I do agree. Like, I think you see, these differences in what the generations value, and I think there's various explanations. And one of those explanations would be, I think that that correlation to religious belief also, that there are some causal aspects. Like, I think you can offer some causation as to why people who are believing the Bible, and the Bible is a source of truth and of moral teaching, or people who are especially like learning evangelical theology and evangelical churches, if church attendance is higher, why their morality would be slightly different towards these issues as well. So I do think it makes sense. I'm not as liberal as my generation on plenty of points, but I do think by and large it's moral progress on these issues, because I don't think that I think there's a point where you can swing too far the other way politically, but I think on a lot of these issues there's no point. I just can't see why it's like morally wrong. Like it's not even clear to me from internally within Christianity how there's in some cases, why Christianity would be against it. I mean, on some issues, I get it. Like prostitution, for example. Within a Christian framework, I suppose that sex is to be within marriage and not outside of it. So you could say it's morally wrong in that sense. But even something like abortion doesn't seem to me to actually be opposed by like a biblical Christian theology. And it actually seems that in the Old Testament, Yahweh is more than willing for people to perform abortions as part of like a trial by drinking water to test for adultery in the woman. And you could say, well, that's just allegorical or whatever, but it's not exactly coming out against it. And
yeah, I think that's a misread of the Bible. But I also let me just say, I wanted to point out something, because I did find my study. So here's what it is. Here's what people hold as justifiable. So Generation Y and Z are statistically significantly more likely to hold these things justifiable. 1, claiming government benefits to which you are not entitled. 2, avoiding a fare on a public transport. 3, stealing property. 4, cheating on taxes. 5, someone accepting a bribe in the course of their duties. 6, homosexuality. 7, prostitution. 8, abortion. 9, suicide. 10, euthanasia. They're much less likely to have national pride and much less likely to consider the importance of God. And so I look at that and I see some serious trends. And I'm actually thinking I might write a book called having something to do with either Lucifer or Jezebel's influence on society.
Well, with those points, SJ, are there any of those points that you think are actually good things?
Good things?
Yeah, because I thought that it was a mixed bag. So there were some of those points that you went through where I was like, yeah, that's definitely wrong, and I disagree with that. But there were other points that you said, maybe 2 or 3 of them, where I thought, well, that's, like, that doesn't seem morally wrong to me, that people would be changing their views on that topic.
Like which one? Stealing, cheating?
No, I think one of them, I can't. Definitely one of them was homosexuality, and one of them was what was it? It was like one of the last 3.
One of the last 3? Oh, suicide, euthanasia, and the national pride idea. So they have less national pride.
Yeah, both of those actually. So suicide / euthanasia, I don't think in all cases is just completely wrong. And national pride, like, that isn't necessarily a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing either. Like, I'd have to look into exactly what that means to say anything about it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I look at our country and I think that patriotism. Now, I'm not the kind of person who's following around Trump rallies or doing stuff like that, but the level of patriotism, there is a difference, a line between Republicans and Democrats in our country on what some people view as patriotism, and so that's one of the things that they found in the moral foundations theory too.
I think in your country, the Democrats, who are meant to be, the more left-wing party, tend to be more like our conservatives. So it's a very different kind of political landscape over there in America.
Yeah, it's unique.
but I just think this idea, I think it has, the idea of nationalism has some good points, but I do think it's perhaps past its sell-by date in terms of how we kind of live as a global community now. How networked we are to other countries. I just don't think it's a tenable way for us to live at the scale that we do live on the planet, with how interconnected our economies are, with the amount of resources, finite resources, which are running out, with the way the scale at which we're able to affect, say, like the temperature globally. So if America makes a policy on what its companies can do, or if China decides that it's going to burn coal as the primary source of energy, then that really does have real effects on the rest of the world because of the scale. So I think almost the nationalistic kind of myth that we might tell ourselves, it might have been useful at one time in history for organizing society, but I don't think it's the best way of doing it now. I think we should probably get past sort of where we're, but it doesn't even make sense to me at all why someone should be proud of where they're born when it's not something that you've particularly chosen. To be proud of what kind of people you are by virtue of like the work ethic that you have or something like that, like, oh, we're a really good sort from around here, so that kind of makes sense to me. But just by virtue of like I was born in this geographical boundary or something, or my country has a governmental system which I had no part in establishing or maintaining, like it doesn't really, because it's not like creditable to you in any way. It's almost like the same problem as someone saying, well, it's morally wrong to be black or to be a woman or something like that. Well, they didn't really choose that. It's not creditable to them in some way. So they're not responsible for it. So yeah, those are my thoughts anyways.
Well, I mean, I can say if I were in a country where they had a terribly horrible government or they had a really corrupt system or something like that, I can say I certainly wouldn't be a big advocate for my country, and I'd probably try to figure out how to get out of it.
Yeah, I agree.
But I happen to be, I feel really lucky. I feel like I won the lotto in life being born in the United States, to be honest. But if I lived in your country, I'd probably feel like I won the lotto there too. Or if I lived in Norway, I'd feel like I won the lotto in Norway or Sweden or any of these other places where my family hails from. So that's, I guess I just want to point out that I'm trying to figure out, and I guess I'm glad I'm talking to you, because I was trying to figure out angles for my paper, because I actually do it backwards. Researchers are supposed to actually do the paper where first you do the lit review, which I did. I did do a literature review, but then you form your hypotheses based on the literature review. Well, I kind of cheated, so I decided I'm going to go ahead and look at the data, see what the plug it all into SPSS, run the statistics, see what the numbers are, and then go back and try to figure out why it's like it is. And so now you can help me, because you're a millennial, so your generation,
right?
You can speak to some of that, so I can understand it a little bit more. There's other things about the millennial generation that we're noticing, and a lot of really interesting things that people don't realize that I'm not putting in my paper. But like, for example, the millennial generation is very resilient. Okay, that's what they're saying with getting through this pandemic and all that kind of stuff. They're just really counting on the resilience, and you can find that in what study was that? I want to say it's Gallup, but maybe it's not Gallup. I forget where I got that from. But the other thing about the millennial generation is that I thought was kind of interesting, and I noticed this from when I'm working with a millennial. When I was born and raised, and when I went to school when I was young, we didn't have syllabi. We didn't do those in classes. I think in college we might have. I don't remember really that well. But I know that when I was in high school and grade school, we definitely did not have a syllabus in our classes. And so we didn't have rubrics either. Like, we were not given rubrics. We were just told, do the paper, the person grades it. You'd go and ask, why did you give me this particular grade? And they would sometimes, if you even had dared to ask them, which millennials certainly do that with the rubric in hand, but we would do it without the rubric. And sometimes the professors would say something like, I really don't recall. You're like, why did I get a B instead of an A? I really don't recall. Oh, okay, thanks, great, that was wonderful. And so the thing is, how that translates into the workplace is when I go to work, and I'm working with millennials, and I had a number of millennials under me as staff, for example, when I was associate dean. A lot of times I would tell them to do something. Like, I'd say, put together, we want to do a benchmarking study of other schools' management major or something like that. And so we'd look at what courses the other schools were offering and what the content was in those courses. And so we would look at that kind of stuff. And I remember telling somebody that, okay, I need you to go to all of our peer institutions. We had a specific list, and our aspirant institutions and our competitors. We had a list for each of these, and that's created by our accreditor, AACSB. So I want you to go to those and identify, this major and find out which courses are in it. And so I gave pretty specific instructions. But I remember in every case, like when I would do something like that, the millennial would come up to me and say, okay, so I want to structure it like this. I'm going to do an Excel spreadsheet, and here's how each column is going to look, and would lay it all out. And I think to myself, yeah, that's fine. Which font do you want? I don't really care. Times New Roman, 12-point font. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me. But it was funny because I thought to myself, why are they doing this? Like, it actually, for a Generation Xer, this is like strange. And then I actually took. I have a class, and we have a millennial person a person who teaches about generations, who comes in and teaches the class. And I was listening to her, and she said, they're just asking for specifics because they want to do it right the first time. They don't want to have to keep resubmitting it to you and fixing it because they didn't ask you these questions up front. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's what it is. That's actually really good they're doing that then. And I didn't understand it. So sorry to keep talking, but it just really was kind of blew my mind when the woman who was teaching that, just opened my eyes to, well, this is what they just want to do a good job first time. So
yeah, I think that's something I see. I think something that there's like pros and cons to that, where I think my generation is perhaps
Hi.
I think we're it can be advantageous in some situations, because it's like if you have that guidance or whatever, you get it right first time. But otherwise, it might be difficult finding your own way if there isn't that structure as well. I think that could be an issue. But I'll yield my thought because you want to say hi to London Theist.
Yeah. Hey, Dean, he's been on my channel before. Actually, I forgot to put you on my opening thing. I'm going to have to redo that too and add you too. So I got to do that.
No, that's cool. I thought I'd pop in and say hello. I've got a little bit of time. I'm in the bedroom, so apologies for the background setting. But
I just see a wall.
yeah, that's true. It's just behind me on the bed, so.
Yeah, my background scene's not exciting either. On Zoom, I've got a pretty cool background, but I wasn't able to figure out how to do that on this.
I like the sunflower. Is it a real sunflower though?
No, it's fake. I've got 3 of those.
Because I've not seen it turning round through it.
yeah, it's fake. I love sunflowers, so I put them in my house in different places. I've got little sunflower signs and things like that. So, well, cool. So London Theist, what brings you here? We were just talking about the generations, but we can talk about all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, no, I just popped through. I saw you put in our group chat on the Twitter, and I saw Nathan was in with you, and I thought I'll just come say hello to you both.
Yeah.
So I was on your channel before SJ, sorry, and we had a good chat, and I've seen Nathan's channel quite a bit, so I've already introduced myself. So
yeah, good. Yeah,
call me Dean, by the way. It's not
Dean. Yeah, go back, everybody, and watch the video that I had with Dean. I had it pinned on my tweets for a long time. It was a very exciting video, and so that was always good. And so you two know each other from Twitter, right?
Only really from Twitter and from watching the interview, the Why is London Theist a Theist?
SJ's title.
Yeah, you guys are actually probably really close to each. Now I remember Manchester versus London, right?
In American terms, that's really close, but in like English terms, it's like not that close.
That's funny. How long would it take to drive between you?
Like 8 hours or something.
Oh, maybe? Wow, that's pretty far.
Depending on the traffic around Birmingham.
Yeah. See, that's like for me driving down to let me think here. Yeah, me driving down to Key West. That's about 8 hours from where I am. I want to drive down to 8 hours, and it's probably about 8 hours for me to go to Atlanta. And so that's pretty far. But I consider Key West really fun and worth it. So
yeah.
Have you guys ever been into the United States?
Yeah, I've been California, Atlanta, Florida when young.
Oh, okay.
So I've been quite a few places.
Nathan hasn't been here, and I haven't been to Manchester, but I've been to London, and I hopefully will get to go back to London soon because my brother's getting married over in London. So,
cool.
Pretty exciting. We're just hoping to get rid of this COVID situation so we can get over there.
Yeah.
So my sister-in-law soon sister-in-law wants to get married in a really big church there. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
So I'll have to invite you guys to come over to the reception, right?
Yeah, I'll be there.
No, this is funny. So, well, cool. So what else is going on? What's new with you guys? What are you working on?
Did you see, Nathan, Braxton's response to you?
I was saying I briefly watched. Well, I listened to it while I was having a shower, if that counts. So I was saying before that I don't think my critique was particularly insightful anyway, really, because the video that I made, it's not like I didn't watch the video, think through each point. It was more like an off the cuff. Like I've got home from work. I was going to watch this, and then I thought, well, I've not put out a video in a while, so I might as well commentate on this while I watch it. And so that's one thing. I actually don't think that my critiques are that good, especially on some of the questions. But I don't think that Braxton's response to me was that good either. Like I was saying before, I don't know if you heard, but like he what some of the things I mentioned, for example, I asked, well, why would prostitution be wrong if these conditions are met? So like if someone's pressured into it because of their environment, which is outside of their control, and it's out of desperation, then I agree that could be wrong. Or if someone's forced into it by someone else and they don't want to do it, that could be wrong. But otherwise, if everyone involved is consenting, there's an exchange of services for money. The person gets what they want. The prostitute would get the money that they want for the service that they're happy to do. I can't see what would be wrong with it then in that situation. And rather than like address those sorts of questions that I was raising, which those questions maybe aren't pertinent to what Braxton was asking in the first place, but rather than address them, Braxton goes off about how, well, atheists who are relativists don't have a leg to stand on because there's no morality fit. Well, I'm a moral realist anyway, so it's not even what I believe. Like this is completely irrelevant to anything I think.
Okay.
but it might be convincing maybe because it helps the audience to sort of paint me under the broad brush that atheism comes under. But maybe that's my fault, maybe I should, if I'm going to put stuff out there publicly, I should make sure that my criticisms are like that devastating that you can't get right now. But I should make better attempts at conveying and communicating my thoughts.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I'm curious, Dean, what I was telling Nathan, or what I was showing Nathan, is I had this study, and I'm going to I think I can share my screen and maybe show this part of the study if that works. I don't know if it's going to work. Let me just see if that's going to work. There it is. Okay. All right. So if you guys, can you see this screen?
Just about, yeah. Well,
just about. Is it too teeny?
Yeah. You might want to go, Control Plus or something, SJ.
Okay. View. Let me just add up. Hold on. Let me make this bigger. Not let me bigger. Okay. Here we go. 200%. Okay.
200 might be a bit too big.
Oh yeah. So now can you kind of see it? I'm going to move it around a little bit.
Yeah.
See, over on the far right, you're going to see statistical significance. This is highly significant when it says 0.000. Really, really super significant differences here. This is not even playing around. Like on almost all of them. Oh wait, this one, it wasn't significant.
Sorry, I don't know if I understand, because like my understanding, and I've not gone back to study statistics fully yet, is like like the strongest correlation you can have is 1 between 2.
Right.
Is that not what this is measured? What's this measuring?
No, that's not measuring that. Significant is what I'm looking at is significant differences between the two groups. So I've got here Generation Y and Z versus Generation X and Boomers. And what I found is if you look at the means on these different things, it's statistically significantly different, meaning that one group has much different values than the other group. And so if you see, can you guys see justifiable claim of government benefits? Everything except for euthanasia was statistically significantly different. So we got prostitution, abortion, suicide, national pride. And then there was a significantly difference here, because you can see right here, this, like right here, I've got the number, a higher mean. One's 2.17 and one's 1.61. And then look at the difference in the importance of God.
Well, I think this could be interesting, right, in comparing like what we think about these things. Like if we went through those points one by one, like would we even all think that they were good or bad things?
Yeah, I'm curious to see what Dean thinks too, because he's in your generation, and so I know that Dean values God, and he would be the outlier saying the importance of God. God's highly important. But where else would you lie?
Well, do you want to bring up the thing so we can see? So I can't remember that.
Okay, here, I'll go back to it. Sorry. Okay, application. All right, there it is again. Okay, so like for example, and some of these are, it's kind of counterintuitive on the way some of these are. It's just that when I interpreted them, I had to look at how they did the means, because sometimes they have 1 is the most important, and other times on some of these other measures, they have a higher number is the most important, the highest number. Okay. So it kind of varies. But how it worked out was, you can see right here, the importance of God, the 2 generations, X and the Boomers, believe God's highly important versus
what does that mean? Like were people asked, is God important to you, or does it mean they were like how, what does it mean, that category mean? Like how did they measure that?
It's a let me just get back over here to get back to you guys. It's a scale. It's basically saying on a scale, it's like a Likert type scale where it says, and I don't remember exactly which way the anchors were, but 1 would be the most important and 10 would be the least important, and you had to put yourself down on that sort of thing. That's how they usually work. Okay. So it's just kind of interesting.
And that was the same for all of these questions, right? All of the questions were on that like 10-point scale, like a very
similar scale. Yeah, the justifiable ones were all on a very similar scale to each other, but the importance of God was a little bit different of a scale. Okay. And the national pride one. And so
was this just an American thing?
Yeah, I isolated America. Maybe because you two are here, maybe what I should do for fun after I get off this call is go and isolate England.
Yeah,
I think maybe I will do that.
Do you guys think the importance of God to someone is like is a moral question? So it would be morally wrong to say that God isn't important to you, and it's morally good to say. Is that somewhere we disagree?
Morally wrong for God to be
to be unimportant to you for the question. I guess that was why I was trying to clarify what it meant, like the importance of God's existence, maybe, or like are you saying it's morally is, I don't know, maybe SJ can clarify.
Yeah.
So is it, are people making a moral, is it a sin? But basically, I think that's kind of what you might be asking. Is it a sin not to?
Well, I guess I'm asking, is it more, because I mean, I don't really think we'd mean the same things by sin. And that would be, you know, the whole.
Yeah, maybe we'll get away from that word. But is it okay? Is it moral to not value God's importance? That's a question.
Yeah.
I'll see what I'll defer to London Theist and see what he says. I do have my opinion on that.
See, because from the UK, it's probably different. Like I explained before, Nathan and I, we're raised pretty much secular, so we're not. It's not got the high emphasis maybe in American Protestant like fundamental. The way America, God's in the public picture probably a lot more than here. But I know when I become a Christian, my sort of beliefs changed about that. Like when I grew up, I never, like I said, I was agnostic, so it wasn't on the forefront. So I would never have said someone who doesn't, like all my friends, I would never say they're not moral for not trusting in God. So I would probably say no to that in the sense. But since I'm a Christian, my whole life's now revolving around God and my church and things like that. Is I could answer it differently in a sense, but I don't feel like I still wouldn't say Nathan or any agnostic. It would be sinful in the sense, like sinful maybe in the sense that they're going against the like general revelation of God, natural revelation. But yeah, it's different from the UK. I'd imagine the chart would be quite different from the American one on that.
Let's take a look at that.
Yeah, because I don't personally. I also don't think it's like a particularly moral question. I guess if a certain kind of Christianity is true, then you could say it's moral, because what morality is by definition on that view is, you know, like what God says, and you know, God says He's made Himself clear, so you wouldn't be you know, you ought to believe true things or something, and God says He's made it clear that Christianity is true, and so if you're doing that, there's in some way you're, but. I guess I don't think it's moral because I don't think that part of it's true. Like I think it's more like a probabilistic sort of claim that someone would make for Christianity being true. Like they just evaluate the evidence and say, well, I mean, I guess some theists say, I know, right, God's implanted in me this belief, and I know. But I think for the types that I find appealing would be saying, well, like this belief's more probably true, but then it doesn't seem like there's any way of having like certainty or certain belief, and then it seems wrong to say that someone's immoral for honestly saying I don't have enough evidence or something like that to believe a certain proposition.
I just want to say hi to Rob. Rob from Sentinel Apologetics is here too.
Hello. How's everyone doing?
So good. Now Nathan's surrounded. So we're deprogramming the work that Pine Creek Doug has done.
Hey, I'm coming in as a very, very friendly theist. So that's all.
We both are. So.
Joking around. Yeah, no, we're all just joking around.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So what percentage, actually, since I did talk about Pine Creek Doug, and Pine Creek Doug was shocked last time I was on a channel with him that I believe in God 100%. I don't have a doubt. And that was crazy to Pine Creek Doug. He just can't believe that. And maybe I'm an outlier, but I do believe that pretty firmly. But I wonder if you guys gave a percentage. How confident are you in your beliefs? I guess I'll ask Rob and London Theist.
I'm so confident that, as Blaster Master just said, I put everyone to sleep. So
Blaster Master. No, it's just Blaster Master has an opinion that Blaster Master is an agnostic. He's been on my channel too. Rob, did you happen to see my opening for this?
No, I literally just got home. I had to help my uncle.
I've got a little opening in the video, my new opening, that I'm going to modify and actually add Nathan, and I'm going to add London Theist because I forgot. I got to go back and look through my videos and make sure I get everybody. So.
Okay.
So
by the way, SJ, I'm sorry for being a little bit impatient in your stream yesterday with Sal.
Oh, that's okay.
I was just sort of like triggered. So yeah. Anyway.
Well, see, he's kind of unique because he went from, I thought, for some reason, I was thinking that he was behind the idea of evolution and even how he started the conversation. But then I realized as it went on that he started off as a theistic evolutionist, and then he went to old Earth, and now he's kind of skirting around young Earth creationism. So I thought that that's really interesting given his background, how he's taken that view, and he's got reasoning for it. But I don't fully understand a lot of the things he was talking about because I haven't taken those subjects. So
Yeah.
but
Anyway,
you have, it sounds like.
I don't want to devolve it into that discussion or derail this conversation, but I just want to let you know I apologize if I.
Oh, no worries. I thought you were fine. He wants to. He was really excited. I gave him. He wanted to. I shared his email address with you on Facebook, so you can contact him for that 5 day.
5-day discussion. Yeah.
He wants to have an all day, like 8-hour day, 5 days.
Nathan, don't you do like 8-hour streams occasionally?
Occasionally, yeah. It kind of depends. Like some of the open conversations go on for a while, and especially like the ones that me and James Fodor are doing, where we're dealing with like specific apologetics arguments, because we want to be able to give like a complete treatment of each of these topics, and that means that you've got to you've got to go through like an entire series of one of William Lane Craig's Defenders courses or something but then the only progress you make is maybe you've addressed William Lane Craig's version of the argument, but there's a Professor Andrew Loki who's got a different version, or whatever.
Yeah, Andrew. Whenever I see his last name, I'm thinking Loki.
Val is in the chat, by the way, and he says he's going to be on here shortly, taking care of his mom.
I think on your original question, by the way, SJ, I think I'm like 10% confident that like a god in general exists, and maybe like 0.5% confidence that the god of Christian theism exists.
That's very low.
What's your confidence in the god of the Islam faith exists?
Probably about similar, probably like 0. I'd give it like a 0.3 or 4 or something like that.
Okay, so a little lower.
Do you want me to give a stat on all the gods, what I think?
Yeah.
I reckon, you can't put 100%, that's unscientific, but I reckon definitely in the high 90s, all the gods of human history.
Well, what do you mean by that, though, Rob? So do you mean that either? I guess there's a couple of things you could mean, right? So you might mean that it's the same God that stands behind them all, or you might mean that
could be one possibility. Yeah.
Or like an ancient Near Eastern author, you might think that these other gods, like a henotheist, right, where there's like a supreme God, but there are other gods in these other cultures. Some Christians will say, well, these other gods are actually demonic entities and stuff. That's why Kali is so frightening, because it's actually a demon. People like Dr. Michael Brown will go with that view. Like, what do you mean by
Michael Heiser?
They all exist? No, I mean Michael. I mean Michael Brown, the charismatic.
No, I'm saying also Michael Heiser, though, because Michael Heiser looks at Psalm 82 and really dug into that with Unseen Realm. I think that's what.
Yeah, I reckon
I'm probably going to.
Yeah, I reckon all those models. Like, if I was to distill it down, if I was to sit with a Muslim, and this is what's so ironic and funny, that word. This is what Heiser would say. That word God. We put attributes to that word. Elohim and God literally just means a being that is not of the terrestrial realm. So, like, even Samuel, who became a disembodied Elohim, was conjured up. So. But if I was to talk to a Muslim, I could communicate the Trinity through Allah. Or in other words, there's two Allahs that appear as a plurality in the Quran. But then if I was to go, okay, polemically, I can show Allah as a true God in that roundabout way, which is connected to the Christian God. But just the happenings of early Islam, when Muhammad encounters what he thought was a jinn, which, by the way, is that whole watcher tradition, I would ultimately then go down that trajectory and say, yeah, this is all demonic and evil, and there's an intelligent agenda behind these entities.
See, what I like about that, what I really like, one reason I really, really liked the Unseen Realm was because I had not ever paid any attention to Psalm 82. I don't know how I missed it, I don't know what happened. I know different English translations translate it differently too, which is kind of, maybe that's how I missed it. I don't know. But what I can say is it gave me an explanation, because people always say, well, how come the Indian, like I have a lot of friends who are Indian, and I just do that because of my school. I work with a lot of Indians, and my one friend Rusty, Craig's here. Oh, good. My friend Rusty always tells me his wife is Christian and his kids decided to be Christian, but he's decided, he's Hindu beliefs, and he believes that he's got all these little gods, and he's got this one God that hangs in his car, and he says he prays to this God all the time. And I think to myself, I'm trying to justify that or reconcile that, because I feel like he probably is getting some sort of interaction. And so that Psalm 82 helped explain all of that to me. Hey, Craig.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Oh, wow. I bet you $1,000 this works for about 10 minutes, and then I won't be able to hear anybody.
So now Nathan's really surrounded.
Yes.
SJ, SJ, I'm putting two, just for the sake of the audience.
Oh, yeah.
I'm putting 2 verses in the chat because you asked about it, how do other translations do it? So the ISV Bible is what I use. This is my main Bible now. So notice it says among the divine beings. That's how they render Elohim. Now, if you want to see how they do it with Genesis 3, no snake. It's a shining entity that was communicating with Eve.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That is fascinating. You know why that's fascinating? Is because it says that he's going to come disguised in light.
Yeah, Nakash, the Hebrew word Nakash, Heiser gets into that a lot in his books. And so the ISV, so Annette Reed was one of the Enoch scholars that Heiser knows well, like personally. She was the base translator for the ISV, the Genesis book of the ISV. And she wasn't the ISV Bible was released 2014, so it's a recent translation. And
Yeah, that's good. I've been looking at Bible translations. I think one step for Satan, one way that you can try to turn people away from different beliefs is to just have people rewrite the Bible to say exactly what you want it to say rather than what it originally said. And so you've got the new translations. It was the NRSV is a translation that they've decided that they're going to try to get rid of a lot of the gender references. And then there's the Passion Translated has decided totally to change 1 Timothy 2:12 and a couple of other verses to get rid of the hierarchy that God's established, where Christ is at the head, then the male, then the female. That's the hierarchy that's listed in a lot of different verses, but it's been eliminated in the Passion Translation. And so I always try to find a decent translation. And I have, you showed me ISV. I like that translation.
Yeah.
What translation do you guys use?
I've got the ESV because that's what was recommended to me when I was in like a Calvinist church. But I don't like it because of the Calvinist interpretation it takes, though, on certain terms. I think I prefer the RSV. Maybe what's the is it the New Jerusalem Bible? I think that might be one of the best.
New JPS is good. Yep.
Yeah, I think, but I think I like the RSV because it tends to remain neutral on like key parts. Because I think it's really important, right? So people definitely have like motivated reasoning when it comes to translating certain words in certain areas, but that can completely change like someone's theology, and that's why I don't like the SV anymore as a translation.
Yeah, I'll show you. Yeah, so I that's the thing. If I was to fall back on a second translation, ESV would be the one. But just to defend what Nathan's saying here, I'll show you an interesting comparison, SJ, in the live chat. So if you go to Romans 3:26 in the ESV, I'll put this in the chat. So it says, this is the ESV. It says that we are justified when we have faith in Jesus, right? That's how the verse ends. And
which one is this? Is the ESV? You said?
Yeah, that's the ESV. So, yeah.
Let's see what it says. It says, it was to show his righteousness at the present time, so that he might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith. Okay.
Yeah, faith in Jesus, right? Now
Right.
Look at what the ISV does.
It's taking my StreamYard a second to pop this up. Okay, let's see.
There you
Here's
go.
the ISV. He wanted to demonstrate at the present time that he himself is righteous and that he justifies anyone who has the faithfulness of Oh, wow.
So, are you justified by having faith in Jesus? Now, obviously, theologically, that's all right because that's Reformation stuff. But think about it. This is where the Catholics go. But hang on a second, that's still a work. You having to have faith in Jesus is. So, it's the whole Ephesians 2 thing. It's you're justified by faith, not of works, lest anyone should boast. And so then, it's the faithfulness of Jesus and his righteousness that's imputed to you, and hence it's no longer a Calvinistic sort of system. It's a big blend of, say, Molinistic, Lutheran.
See, I'm looking at this. You can interpret this different ways. That's what's kind of a little bit scary to me.
Because of the Greek in there. Literally, it's a flip a coin sort of. And N.T. Wright prefers this rendering, faithfulness of Jesus, than faith in Jesus.
So this is because see how you're interpreting it. There's two ways to look at this exact passage, though. I mean, just to look at the ISVs, and I could say that means that I need to be like Christ, having his sort of faithfulness, or it could mean that I've got Christ. He's faithful towards me, and so.
And everything he did, because he's the high priest who's without sin, right? So his 100% righteousness is imputed to you, and that's how salvation works, rather than us sort of like, we don't have the power or any ability to have, say, quote unquote, 100% faith in Jesus. So think about it. If you just have that rendering faith in Jesus, it gives the impression, well, at what level? Because didn't Jesus say, even if you have faith as a mustard seed? So does Paul, are you saying 100% faith? Well, but didn't you just say earlier in Romans 3, we're all fallible? We can't have 100% faith sometimes. So rather, it's the faithfulness of Jesus that's why you're eternally secure. Yeah.
I'm right now. I'm looking up the King James version because I actually in my little
King
book
James
that I'm
has
working
faith.
on.
Yeah.
I want to see exactly what they say in that one, and so I'm just going to put that in here. Someone's got a little bit of background noise going on. I don't know. Okay, so if I go this one, here's King James.
Believe it. Yep.
Justifier of him which believeth in Jesus. So that's the
But
end.
if you want a really, really clear example of what I'm getting at, go to Philippians 3:9. I'll type in the ESV of Philippians 3:9. See if that actually fits in the. I don't know if that fits in the chat. Let me just check. Oh yeah,
Nathan, I think that's you with the background.
Yeah, you may need.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. There you
You
go.
gotta.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yes, this should work. All right. So this is the ESV in Philippians 3:9, and then the second one is the ISV. Tell me what is very subtly different between the two.
Okay, so let's see. This one is the ESV. And be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Christ, the righteousness from God that depends on faith. Okay, and then you've got the other one.
Okay, and it's coming up now.
There we go. Okay. Depends. Okay, found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but one that comes through the faithfulness of the Messiah. Okay, I like that.
So notice, but that which comes through faith in Christ, the righteousness from God that depends on faith. But then it's radically different when you go, one that comes through the faithfulness of Christ, the righteousness that comes from God, and that depends on faith.
How did they? Do you know what the Greek is in that? I mean, how did they
It's
change
just two
that?
words. It's literally two words, and it's a flip of a coin. Which is it?
Okay.
Because those two words, you could read it as faith in or faithfulness of.
Okay.
Faith in, ironically, is a more Catholic reading.
I'll give you a really important one. One's like, so in Psalm 22:16, most of the more evangelical-leaning translators will translate it as, dogs surround me, a pack of villains encircles me, they pierce my hands and feet. And they'll translate that as like messianic prophecy. The RSV authors, the RSV being what Catholics will use sometimes as well. For dogs are all around me, a company of evildoers encircles me. My hands and feet have shriveled, which is very different. It's very difficult to say from that, well, this is messianic prophecy about Jesus, and you can get into the whole discussion of why there's mirroring in the New Testament of the Old Testament. Interestingly, I think Rob takes a kind of Christianity where he'd probably agree with me that they're writing with these texts in mind. The difference in our explanation would be that Rob's saying that they're doing that in an inspired way, and I'd say, well, there's no God involved, but that could be a complete red herring. I think it's just important on this translation because Christians can develop theological points about either prophecy or especially about predestination or foreknowledge, or based off of a word that's been used when that word isn't necessarily the best choice. And then, or it might be that there's if you look in the oldest Hebrew manuscripts, it might say something different to what the Septuagint says, or to what, especially the whole King James thing, is if they got it right with their few manuscripts that they had to work off based off of all the stuff we have now when we come and do a translation. And there's all sorts of considerations to take into account, like who's funding the translation, what's their theology to begin with, are they going to bring that? And I think we should consider the theology of the translators just as much as we should consider the theology of the New Testament authors themselves as they write the New Testament in choosing certain things to include and stuff like that. But Christians are going to take different views on, because the Bible, whether you should do historical criticism on the Bible in this way or whatever.
Okay, so here's we'll compare that. So here's ISV. So they gouged my hands and my feet.
The D and the E there are footnotes, by the way. By the way, Nathan, the piercing or the gouging was a big. I agree. So it was definitely a the word in itself was really weird. So when the King James has pierced, it was technically a guess on their part. The more correct rendering was something like in other words like lions are gouging.
Boring holes. I think I saw one that had that.
Yeah, but you see, the reason why the King James translators went that direction is because they had the New Testament as hindsight to sort of be like, oh, look, see, it's piercing, right? Now, don't forget, so this is where I tell the so-called Jesus mythicists and those. I mean, this is not new to scholars who are post Dead Sea Scrolls, which is where I'm going with this.
The reason I raise it, though, is because it is new to evangelical Christians who think that somehow as they read the Bible, they've got direct access to the consciousness of God, and there's no interpretive layer there that they're bringing.
I've actually privately in my own church. In fact, the Q&A I did, the Q&R that I did on the weekend, I had to privately tell the church they were using what's called a Passion Translation.
Oh no.
Yeah, they had a guest speaker come on, and I was just like, guys, just what are you doing?
Oh, that's such a bad one.
So anyway, a few people were asking me, how did these biblical authors think and say what they were doing? And I was just like, look, the Bible's a completely human text. It's not like God was, like Neo in the Matrix, he's getting downloaded. Oh, now I know Kung Fu. It's like Ezekiel's getting downloaded what to say, and no, these guys are just, they had an agenda, they had things to say, and this thing known as epiphany can arise, and so why this is known as sacred is because the message seems to transcend time. That's the point. That's what makes it sacred. It's a timeless message. But to come back to the piercing of Psalm 22, don't forget that the earliest Old Testament we had is the Leningrad Codex before 1948. So Leningrad Codex is dated to the 900s AD. So pretty much all so-called messianic prophecies, not just Psalm 22, even Isaiah 53 and all these passages, when you see the New Testament quote them, well, it looks like, and plus, by the way, the Septuagint was the dating of the the early Septuagint that we had was even in the 1st century, not even back in the BC period. So basically, there were critics at like the Wellhausen hypothesis. Basically, they were like, look, how do we know that Christians? I mean, you're talking 900 years post 1st century. Christians could have been meddling with this stuff, and they just made it look like, that it looked like Jesus and so on. So this is why the Dead Sea Scrolls was such a significant discovery, because you can't have Christians tampering with the text 200 years before Christianity. So in Psalm 22:16, it actually has Pierce, and it doesn't mention lions, and that's what spooked, I guess you could say, the Dead Sea Scroll scholars. They're like, "Oh, look at that! Wow!" Like, in fact, it's the other way around. So the differences you see in the Masoretic text, which is the 900 AD text, that was tampered because the Jews who didn't like Christians using the original Hebrew text as a positive for Jesus, those non-Christian Jews tampered the text to make it look like it's not reading like it's messianic. So, for example, Isaiah 53:11 in the Dead Sea Scrolls says, "Out of the suffering of his soul, he will see light." So, suffering and then resurrection. In the Masoretic text, which, by the way, SJ, you can bring this up in the King James Version. So, Isaiah 53 verse 11, it says something like, "Out of the suffering of his soul, he will be satisfied." Like, there's no mention of light or seeing or like resurrection. And scholars also note just the grammar and the wording and the spelling of that, of just the way it flows. You can tell someone's tampered it. Kind of like the Testimonium in Josephus, where Christians interpolate onto Josephus what he's saying about Jesus, but it's the Jewish way. It's the Jews sort of the Masoretes tampering with it so that it doesn't look like it's Christian. Yeah.
No, I see. I'm glad with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Michael Brown has pointed that out too, and he's got the expertise in ancient Hebrew. So I think that's a good. Let me before we go. Let me first. Sal just joined. So Sal, he was on my channel yesterday, and Sal and Rob are going to have a 5-day discussion on.
Yeah, the 5-day discussion starting right now, right?
So how are you, Sal?
Even if you have to go, just leave your computer running. It'll last 5 days.
Well, I'm actually, I was actually being quite serious. I have been in debates that have lasted years, and they're very technical, especially with the biologists, physicists, and so they'll say something stupid, but they'll look really good, and then I'll go and investigate.
I've mirrored my camera so I can see you, Sal.
Oh, so I had a debate with Jackson Wheat, student of evolutionary biology, and he said something about eukaryotic evolution, and it was just a passing comment. 30 seconds. I spent the next 2 years debunking it, researching, going to textbooks, taking classes, and then I came back 2 years later and just demolished that argument. And so I found that the point of me saying about the 5-day debate, it's like, all right, so in a 1-hour debate where it's all theater, it's all superficial, people can just make stuff up on the fly. It's a different story when you can actually fact check what they say and force them to back it up. Because I knew that in one debate where it actually got terminated because of James on that modern day debate. And actually I was kind of saved by the bell, because then I had a chance to go and fact check for like 5 weeks. And I'm just like, no, that's not actually a really good argument. Now that I have a second chance, I can come and deliver it. So there was one debate that lasted actually 1.5 years, and I couldn't believe the opponents just dug in their heels. I'm just like, guys, I have piles of math books here, and everything you're saying is just really silly. If you want to just keep this going on, because when your opponent always wants to save face, I said, you got him, because it's embarrassing. So whenever I make a mistake, I'll say, that was a mistake. Thank you for correcting me. But some of these guys, they just want to show that they're infallible, and you catch them on a small error. It's just amazing how all the evasions will just keep going. And I'm just like,
Sal, could you outline what your position is, just for someone like me who's not heard you before? Because it sounds. I was like wondering what exactly it is that the contentious.
One second. I just for the sake of being respectable to SJ, we literally just went straight into this topic. So SJ, I hope this is the prior topic.
That's all good.
I hope that's ironed out, especially for your sake as well. Like.
Completely flexible. Plus, I want to learn more about. I know very little about the topics that Sal has been investigating so deeply, and I know you looked into it pretty deeply too, Rob. So feel free to talk about them because I don't.
So okay.
Just before we move on, though, Rob, could you send me some of the stuff that you've looked at specifically on that? Because I've read some slightly different things.
Peter Flint's the name. He's excellent, really charismatic. Really, he passed away, by the way, in 2016, but. I'll give you his book, his last book before he passed away, which is just literally called The Dead Sea Scrolls. It's probably the most really awesome scholarly, but surprisingly very nice, simple read as well. And yeah.
Peter Flint, I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll pick that up.
Okay, so Sal, and also Nathan's question is very important because that's the type of question I'll ask you as well. If you want, let's just keep things simple because you did mention you were coming from a physics perspective initially in your interview, and you mentioned Hugh Ross, and you said, "Look, thanks for bringing me back to the faith." And I kept repeating in the chat. I kept saying things like, "Look, no working physicists, and whether you're talking about educational curricula, which, by the way, I've just finished from that background myself." And I interact with Hugh Ross. I interact with a lot of scientists in the field. They don't even think about it. It doesn't even occur in their mind to use young Earth creationist science and whatever they're talking about, whatever instrumentation that they're utilizing. It's always just the given data points via the education that they're stemming from, because it's not only peer reviewed, but it's established in the scientific arena. So when you say the Earth is 10,000 years old, like there's zero evidence for that. And I in fact, just the other day, and I'll quickly say this and then you can answer Nathan's question, but someone told me, "Oh, Rob, have you checked out Jason Lyle's PhD? Like, why, in other words, why are the young creationists with PhDs?" Well, yeah, I've actually read, and I do have in my Google Drive.
Why they're old creationists with PhDs, right? It's just semantic.
No. But here's what the common creationist doesn't know. I mean, maybe Sal, so this is why I'm, benefit of the doubt for you. But I've read Lyle's dissertation on the granulation of sunspots. I've read Jim Mason's dissertation on rubidium-strontium mass ratios. The interesting irony is that when Lyle writes what he writes, it's completely consistent with a Hugh Ross type old Earth scenario. So, in other words, he's being very dishonest. He's speaking with a forked tongue when he gets up there. I'm Dr. Jason Lyle, when his very own dissertation is contradicting the young Earth model that he's presenting to these people. So, in other words, why waste resources and time putting that dissertation through peer review, because it's legit work? It's like, this is what I find interesting. I could take Lyle's dissertation and be like, "Look, remember this dissertation?" If I was talking to an astrophysicist about sunspots, I'd be like, "Look, here's a work that does a great job on that." But at the same time, it's a work that showcases the sun is middle-aged at about 4.5 billion years. So why can't I just call him Mr. Lyle rather than Dr. Lyle? Because the doctor is coming from a secular background, and you see, this is the inconsistency. I just don't get that. Anyway.
Can I answer Nathan's?
Yeah, I'm interested. I've got some idea of what it's about, right? So you're talking it. One of the issues seems to be like evolution, young Earth creationism, stuff like that.
Yes.
Like, what exactly are your positions? Is that right?
I'm a young cosmos creationist, and I used to be an evolutionist, then became an old Earth creationist, then became a young Earth creationist. part of the transition was actually when I was studying astrophysics and cosmology. And I don't read Jason Lyle's work. He actually brushed me off when I was pointing out I'm trying to do experiments relevant to the questions. And just like he didn't even give me the courtesy of emailing me back to try to find out my work. I was doing laser interferometry work, and to this day, there was a discussion in my church whether we should invite Jason Lyle to speak, and I voted no. So it's not like I agree with every young Earth creationist in physics about their views. There are about 12 different views, young Earth cosmology views. And as a matter of principle, that means at least 11, if not all 12, are wrong. So I try to, when I teach this, I say this is what I believe, but the evidence is not very promising at this point. On the other side, neither is the evidence very promising for the Big Bang, and 2019 was a terrible year for the Big Bang in terms of experiments. So I'm more.
What was the experiments that was?
They tried to determine the size of the nature of dark matter, and it was a very expensive experiment done, and it caused a lot of despair because they were hopeful that they could find evidence for it, and when it collapsed, I could see all these papers coming out with just all these new theories to try to either account for it or accept alternative theories. But the thing is there's been, when I was in graduate school and also undergrad school, I could hear all the whispers and the professors not being, some were very open, some were just kind of quiet, and same among the graduate students. At my undergraduate university, 3 professors, one of them an MIT PhD in physics who worked in our Earth and space observation. His name's Minas Kafatos. He was one of those who signed a dissent from the Big Bang. And even just as a student, you can't help but notice that. It's like, okay, so we have our textbook things that are teaching us the Big Bang in our textbooks, but we have 3 professors who are of good reputation in the same university saying they don't believe it. So right away, my eyes began to open up. So
how confident are you, Sal, that young Earth creationism is true?
At a personal level, that's a good question. At a personal level, I would say 100%, or maybe 95%. Okay. But in terms of the evidential, if I were teaching responsibly, I'd have to say, okay, guys, you assess it for yourself. Maybe it's not that good, and I don't like young Earth creationism. Creationists saying, "Oh, it's so obvious." I'm just like, no, it's not so obvious, and there's still a lot of problems with the model. And I think that would be something, if I were going through school, I would appreciate when someone says, this is what I believe, but I got to level with you. These are the facts that are problematic for us. There has to be experiments that will go one way or another to validate one model or another. And I'll tell them, okay, there are 12 creationist cosmology models. We can go through each one of them, talk about all their problems, because one model will try to say theirs is the best because of all the other problems in the other 11 models. And I said, that's not a good situation.
Well, I guess I'm interested in, for you, what's the main reason for like a 95, 100% confidence? Is there like a main reason that kind of got you to that point?
Sal, didn't you say something about variable light speed, the speed of light being variable?
Yeah, that was another thing. Is one of the fixes to the Big Bang was variable light speed, because the so-called inflation model also had galactic quantities of matter being accelerated or moved at 1,000 to 1,000,000 to maybe infinite speeds of light. And now the math behind that with all the Einstein field equations, it's a little nasty, but I'm just like, okay, just kind of time out. If we can start patching theories and invoking new entities with absolutely no experimental proof, how is that any more outrageous than any other model? So as far as, but to your point, I actually had the last 7 years, I actually worked in biology because I really did want to work on issues of radiometric dating and the distant starlight problem in cosmology. But the abundant evidence right now for Christ's genealogy in biology is strong. I worked for a retired geneticist. He's a world famous geneticist. He was an atheist, became a Christian. Most of the genetically modified organisms on the planet, or not most, maybe a sizable fraction, were through his gene gun process. He was a genetic engineer. And his work, he was a Cornell research professor. He became a Christian, 10 years later, a creationist, and he's been doing research on whether humanity's young and the long ages of Methuselah and Adam. And so I was assigned over the last 7 years. I said, okay, if humanity's young, that's the most important thing. We can assume an old cosmos, old Earth, for the sake of argument, but that was a big deal. And I was just shocked how many privately and then somewhat publicly, his secular colleagues were echoing the same, maybe indirectly, the kind of the same viewpoints. They would do it kind of in a rhetorical thing, like where they'd say, "Why aren't we dead 100 times over?" And that would catch my attention.
So I'm not sure I've understood though. I don't think first thing I've not understood is the sort of hypothesis in general. Maybe like if you could explain that for me. But then also, why is that good enough to get to like 95 or 100% confidence in like a young Earth creationist point of view?
Oh, well, that's a very good question, and that's a faith extrapolation. And that's why if I were teaching it, I would say, okay, this is just my personal view. We have certain beliefs like eternal life that we can't experimentally prove. But there's a certain point when one feels that they have found evidence of a miracle, that it's strong enough that the testimony of certain things and also the interpretation of, like, say, the sacred text, the scriptures, starts to be very, very convincing. And so
can I just jump in? Okay. There's a lot that you said there, Sal, and with all due respect, I consider you a Christian brother in Christ, but honestly, it's pseudoscience at the highest level, and it's just not true. So, for example, I'm putting links in the private chat with respect to the dark matter stuff, and I'm not sure which one you were referring to. For example, there's a paper in regards to dark matter from scalar field fluctuations. So this is sort of like kind of like a Kraussian sort of cosmology where related to virtual particles coming from a quantum fluctuation pre-Big Bang, pre-Planck epoch. The other paper is more in line with, for example, when Hugh Ross had to write a blog post on the large Magellanic Cloud Cepheid standards in regards to, like, what the paper says, 1% provide a 1% foundation for the determination of the Hubble constant and stronger evidence for physics beyond the lambda CDM. So now the ICR, the Institute for Creation Research, let's see here, Jake Hebert, because I read that paper or that blog post you wrote, Big Bang Hubble contradiction confirmed. So I'm wondering if this is where if you're going to go step by step, if you're going dark matter, right? Is that what you're talking about as far as the 2019 discovery goes?
2019, but a few of my professors have been skeptical of that. I'm just pointing out, if one's going to insist you're 100% right, one has to account for contrary experiments in theory. And I'm perfectly fine saying that we don't know. We have our personal beliefs, and that's all I'm articulating. I'm not trying to tell anyone what they should believe, but if we're going to be fair and accurate, we have to say that we don't have there's no consensus on what dark matter is, and there's no consensus whether it even really exists. If we're going to try to solve things and argue for the Big Bang, there's not even resolution on issues of the redshift, because there's breaks in the secular. So if one's going to be insisting on the Big Bang, we have to say, okay, why are these why are there secular scientists that are also of good reputation, starting with people like Alton Harp, who work for that prominent astronomer. I'm just okay, if we want to be dismissing all of this, it's like, why can't we be thorough? Why can't we just say a timeout? I'm not saying that I specifically said I don't endorse Jason Lyle's views. I haven't endorsed any other young Earth creationists' views. So if you're saying it's pseudoscience, on some level, I might totally agree with you and say maybe the conclusions are premature. But to be arguing that we actually know everything and that we can be 100% sure, I have a problem with that.
I have a couple questions I got to ask, because one of the reasons why I'm not a young Earth creationist, there's a couple, and it might sound very simplistic, but one of them is because I look at the dinosaurs and I look at, I don't believe the dinosaurs were on the planet at the same time that humans were on the planet. And my second thing that I think about is the class that I took in college, or one of the science classes I took, was on historical geology. And we looked at plate tectonics, and we looked at how much time it takes for the continents to have moved in the way that they moved, and to build mountains and things like that. And so it went back pretty far. I'm not against young Earth creationism on the idea that God can make things. I mean, if he wanted to do whatever he wanted to do, he could have made it happen. He could have done a lot of different things. But I'm wondering how, or if you've thought about those two items.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to shut off my camera. I pressed the wrong button.
Oh, no worries.
I was trying to unmute myself. What I have, because I'm very concerned about the faith of science students, I'll tell them what my views are. And if they dissent in their heart, it's like, I totally respect that. You're no less or more of a brother. And my position is, maybe let's wait and see, because there have been questions that 20 years ago we thought were settled, and then I'll see them unsettled. And I'm just like, this, when we're in the business of making observations and facts, gathering facts, one has to keep one's eyes open, because I've seen theories overturned very quickly on one experiment. To quote an atheist, Huxley, he said, the tragedy of science is a beautiful theory can be destroyed by an ugly fact. And so, as I pointed out, there are 11, 12, I lost count of how many young Earth creationist cosmologies there are. They can't all be right.
Yeah.
So they're going to be at least 11 or 12 falsified, just like that. And so responsibly, I'll say it's problematic. That's why I don't, even though I'll convey my personal opinions and faith statements, I will not represent it as empirically validated. That's the issue I have. Conversely, with the Big Bang, I'll have to say, okay, the majority view is this, but it's worthwhile looking at the minority view of the secular scientists. Mm-hmm. And I have to say that they made very respectable arguments too. And then there are things that we discover as we build new space probes and better telescopes and instruments. And I just keep seeing that it goes back and forth. Oh, we've proven this. And then the next year it's like, oh, this is a disaster. And it's just an interesting cycle. I said, this is not very reassuring for any, compared to experimental science that we do in chemistry, where it's kind of more local and we can confine it in the laboratory. Things with cosmology are just very speculative. There's a saying, there's cosmology and then there's speculation, as if, cosmology is even more on the extreme. So I wouldn't, I'm happy saying, okay, there are problems with all these models, Russ Humphreys, Jason Lyle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then I'll point out, all right, there are also problems with the Big Bang. Being scientifically responsible, even though I have my personal biases, I'll just say, how about a timeout? How about a timeout, and we just start reviewing experiments and the facts and just talk about it in a dispassionate way. What I've not approved of is some things, particularly on my side of the aisle, is making it a moral issue where people are being called compromisers or given these horrible names, questioning their character. And that's why I personally went up to Hugh Ross and said, thank you very much for what you did, because it was actually his biology work, even though he's not a biologist, his promotion of a more intelligent, he doesn't use the word intelligent design. I don't know what his term is, but his associates, Richard Deem and Fuzz Rana, did a lot to start to bring me back to the faith, because they demonstrated that there had to be something miraculous that brought about life. And I even though I disagreed with him, and I started talking quasars with him when I spoke with him briefly, because that was his PhD dissertation, I didn't press the issue. I just wanted to express my total gratitude for him being there. And you mentioned about all the fine tuning. I said that was really, really important, and it means a lot coming from someone with his viewpoints that he would say that. And in terms of people that have been more influential on my life, he was more influential on my life many times over than Jason Lyle.
Oh, that's interesting. But how do you and I don't know but with the dinosaurs, I know this sounds like a simplistic, but how do you deal with the dinosaurs? Because that's one thing that I think to myself, I mean, I can't make that argument.
Answer the dinosaur question, and then I'll come back with that dark matter stuff. Yeah.
Can you repeat? Was for you?
Do you believe? Yeah, it was for you, because I was just thinking. Do you believe that dinosaurs were on the Earth at the same time as humans?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what's the evidence for that?
I'm not. And you were saying your problem, SJ, was. I'm sorry. I was.
Well, to me, because I believe that the dinosaurs were around thousands and thousands of, maybe hundreds of thousands of years before. And
millions.
So, is it millions? Yeah,
we are with dinosaurs today. I mean, birds, but I mean, if you're talking about those dinosaurs, easily tens of
like
millions.
Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's what I'm talking about. Those kind of dinosaurs.
And was it because they might be consuming humans, or that we don't find human bones with the human fossils with the dinosaurs? Is that your concern?
No. What's the evidence that humans and dinosaurs walk together?
Oh, the evidence is that the chemical evidence indicates the time of death was recent.
Are you talking about Schweitzer's work?
Chemical evidence, both. I studied amino acid racemization. There are oxidation states, and this is a very important question. And I've talked to others. I was looking at some of the data.
Yeah, but are you referring to Mary Schweitzer's work?
Not specifically. I'm referring to looking at fossils throughout all the strata. And if they indicate about the same time of death, that's not consistent with an old fossil record. Secondly, we have the faint young sun paradox, and that's still an unsolved problem unless one wants to invoke miracles. So I'll tell you why I believe something. I'm not representing it as a proof, but I'm saying this is a serious anomaly.
How does the faint young sun paradox relate with dinosaur fossils?
The fossil dating assumes that starting with the Cambrian, this was all old. If the faint young sun paradox is not resolved, the Earth will be an ice ball and remain an ice ball throughout the whole fossil record. That's still an unsolved problem.
The young sun paradox is going back to the late heavy bombardment sort of period around that.
Yes, but once the Earth is an ice ball, it's going to keep reflecting sunlight back into outer space, and it's going to remain cold. In fact, a 3% change, just a little anomaly in terms of how much light is going out, or either reflected out or staying in the atmosphere.
Yeah, so the faint young sun paradox lasts in itself hundreds of millions of years.
The faint young sun paradox it would turn the Cambrian into an ice ball, and it would stay an ice ball a long time.
Cambrian is 500 million years ago.
The point is that once it's an ice ball, it stays an ice ball. There's not going to be a fossil record. You asked me how that connects to the dinosaurs that are later. Not only will it be an ice ball with Cambrian, it'll stay an ice ball up until the present day.
Sal, the faint young sun paradox in itself, when you're talking about the ecliptical orbit of the Earth around the sun and its variations and so on, and don't forget, why is it called a paradox? Because the sun in itself is smaller in size and all that stuff, right? So when you look at the data behind that, that in itself takes at least 200-300 million years to sort of like work itself out, and then it becomes okay, from 2 billion years moving forward, especially when landmass appears on the scene. So, but that's still 1 billion or even 2 billion years before dinosaurs. So why? So it's a double standard, because if you're going to try and relate it to dinosaurs and fossils, we know if it didn't solve itself out, it would be a slush ball and it would be a snowball Earth and all that stuff, right? But you need it to have lasted for hundreds of millions of years, this faint young sun paradox, for the Earth to be the way it is. So now you're an old Earth person if you believe in the faint young sun paradox.
Now that's an argument by contradiction, where we assume the premise that we're trying to actually disprove, and the premise I'm trying to disprove is the old fossil record, and so I'm assuming it. So let's assume that we have that the mainstream timeline. If we had the mainstream timeline, the sun was 30% less luminous than it is now. Mm-hmm. What will happen is then, if the Earth becomes an ice ball in the process, it starts reflecting light back into space because it's an ice ball. It's white. That's why when we
in the young Earth model, how long?
So to make it simple. I'm not going to make it simple. This is why we want a 5-day debate, because
no.
See, this is exactly the thing I don't like, is where we don't methodically cover things, and I get cut off when I'm trying to make a point.
No, sorry.
Now you know I want a 5-day debate.
You're not addressing the question.
I am addressing it, and I don't like being cut off, and I'm just pointing that out. You're the one who wanted the 5-day debate. If you want to hear me give my answer, I'll give it. If you want to cut me off and just talk, that's fine.
I'll let you talk. I'm
not going to answer your questions. All right.
I'm
not going to answer your questions if you're going to cut me off.
In a 10,000-year-old Earth, how long does this faint young sun paradox last for?
Sir, if you're going to cut me off, I'm not going to answer your questions. I need the courtesy to answer it in the way that I feel best. I'm sorry.
Well, let's just go. Hold on, guys. Let me just first, I want to say thank you so much to John. He's in the chat. He sent a couple super chats, very generous. He says dragon is in the Old Testament 21 times, and he also said, hold on, let me just get to the other one. Where did that go? He also said, okay, dragon is in the Old Testament 21 times, and then he said, because he's also a believer in the young Earth. Shoot, I just lost it again. Sorry. Trying to figure out how to get to this quicker. Okay, and Dr. Mary Schweitzer discovers T-Rex blood cells. So we're in topics that I honestly know so little about. I almost think that it's kind of over my head.
The T-Rex blood cell thing, which ironically is Mary Schweitzer's PhD dissertation back in the 90s. Goes. And the latest one was actually last year, and I think there was one published this year. She herself, in her papers, in the last 3 or 4 papers, she's gone out of her way to be like, look, the creationists are just misusing my work. Fazal Rana wrote an entire book on it, Dinosaur Blood and Age of the Earth. You can't use her work and then go young Earth, when pretty much the majority of the scientists on the team don't even think young Earth when they not only when she was making the discovery back in the 90s, but then she wrote a dissertation on that. And then she's been working on this thing for literally for 20 years now, 25 years on the problem. And she's discovered a lot of fascinating things about the sex of the T-Rex, for example, that was female, possibly pregnant. Now, putting that aside, you are talking about the faint young sun paradox, And I'm saying it takes about 200-300 million years for that to elapse. Notice that in the young Earth model, if you believe, and I think the figure was 10,000 years, but the classic young Earth model is a 6,000-year-old Earth. But either way, I'll be generous. 10,000 years. Are you saying that the faint young sun paradox lasts for mere maybe not even like 1,000 years? Because don't forget, it has to fit within that 10,000 year, spectrum.
Maybe let's unpack a little bit, because I don't know. First place, let's define what exactly what is the significance of the. I mean, this probably sounds like a basic question to you guys, but what's the significance of the faint young sun paradox? Because that's where you kind of lost me. I have never heard of that besides you mentioning it yesterday.
Rob, with due respect, if you're going to cut me off when I'm trying to make an explanation, this is not a discussion.
No, I'm willing to have a gracious
I'm
dialogue.
perfectly fine with you just trying to talk over me, but when I'm trying to make a point, I'm not trying to. I'm just pointing. I'm just all right. I'd appreciate if you not cut me off and start interrupting me when I'm in the middle of the thought. I'm trying to explain things to the audience.
Go for it.
Thank you. All right, Mary. I'm sorry, SJ. I'll tell you, I'm normally very, very polite, but my atheist opponent was far more polite than you've been behaving toward me. So. That said, we can.
Wait, are you saying I'm an atheist?
Okay, all right. I'm sorry.
We'll work it out. No, we'll work it out, you guys. I think it's a topic that both of you guys are pretty tight on. It's like...
So we can be civil now.
Okay.
So the question is, what was the faint young sun paradox? The faint young sun paradox. We can go to the Wikipedia article, and that's at least reasonably neutral. Faint young sun paradox. And if we go to the faint young sun paradox, the faint young sun paradox or faint young sun problem describes the apparent contradictions between observations of liquid water early in Earth's history and the astrophysical expectation that the sun's output would only be 70% as intense during that epoch as it is during the modern epoch. So about the time that the Earth formed, say 4 billion years ago, it was 70% less than it is now. It wasn't as bright. That means it's not as hot, it wouldn't create as much heat on the Earth. So as the sun, it's one of those things. It's like when you get when you have a fireplace and you light the fire, it gets warmer. Now that's a chemical process. In the sun, it's the mainstream model is it's a fusion process, and there are sort of mechanics of that, how it will actually get warmer over time. So if we take the accepted model, that means the sun was cooler or less luminous. And then as the idea is that it will get warmer to this present point. The question that happens then is the Earth will become an ice ball at some point. Like say during the Cambrian, there'll be an ice ball. If the Earth is an ice ball, it's going to be reflecting sunlight back out, and would reflect enough that it would stay an ice ball throughout the time of the fossil record. So even though the sun has gotten warmer, there is kind of a runaway cooling. So in these climate change discussions, we talk about kind of runaway processes, and right now, the model is if there's enough of the greenhouse gases, we'll have kind of runaway heat. There is also, it's kind of being on a nice edge. You can either go one way or the other in terms of what happened in the fossil record, because once it became an ice ball, it would tend to stay that way. And so that basically is why it's, unless there were a mechanism, counter mechanism that would keep the Earth warm enough from becoming an ice ball, then there would be no fossil record to speak of. Life would not have emerged or survived. Even if it emerged, it wouldn't survive. The solutions that have been proposed is some sort of global warming that was finely tuned to be able to kind of, the global warming would evolve simultaneously with the sun, so that as the sun got warmer, the global warming wasn't quite as intense and the climates were managed. So we're in a situation where the fossil record would for it to be there would require kind of miraculous fine tuning, and that's fine. But the point is, we're starting to invoke things that are miraculous to keep the fossil record going. So if one wants to accept that, I totally respect that position. But if one's going to invoke one miracle, you can invoke other miracles. And so to answer the question about why, that's one of the reasons I would at least be skeptical that the dating of the dinosaurs is accurate. And then I mentioned chemical dating. I'd studied chemical dates and also compared them to other radiometric dates, and I found what looked like systemic anomalies. And I haven't published on that. I've been encouraged to publish on that in chemical journals where I don't argue young Earth or old Earth, but I will just review the petroleum, the oil drilling cores, the data from those. So thank you, Rob, for letting me state my position.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a little bit more clear on what it is. So we have a starting point. So I think the big thing is just our difference in. I think actually I don't know if you've read. I think I mentioned it yesterday. Hugh Ross's book on climate change. It's just really fascinating.
I've not read it. But I remember you mentioning it. And it was very interesting. I remember you mentioning the graph of the way
ice,
that and then it flattened out after 9,500 years.
Yeah, it's really, his book is really good because he also was mentioning something that you're mentioning on this idea of one of the things is when we talk about global warming, it could actually bring on an ice age. That's what Hugh was saying, and I thought that was pretty fascinating. And again, this is not my specialization at all, so I defer to you two.
All right, so this is what happens when you get two guys arguing. It's not going to be,
Maybe we should talk about. We
could talk about other things.
Yeah, maybe we should talk about other things like what brought you to Christianity. What I know you guys actually, I know both of your stories on how you came to Christianity. So I don't know, Sal, if we didn't talk about this, but we touched on this a little bit earlier. Is this idea of Psalm 82, which I think is super fascinating from Michael Heiser's stuff on on the unseen realm, said the divine assembly or the divine council. There's these other spiritual beings or sons of God. There's all these references depending on which English translation you go to. But I think that's a pretty fascinating thing too, that we were talking about a little bit earlier, as far as explaining some of the other gods in the world.
I just put it up on my other screen here. God presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, isn't that?
I didn't hear that discussion. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. No, Michael Heiser wrote a book called The Unseen Realm, and I've had him on my channel before, and he's just a really fascinating guy. And he was talking about, he actually takes that, he looks at Genesis 6 and he looks at the book of Enoch, and he kind of puts together this picture where there were these gods that were sent out into the world over all of these countries, and they were given authority over a lot of these different countries. God retained Israel for himself. And then when he sent Jesus, one of Jesus's main calling in the great, when he had the call, the Great Commission, was to tell that he was going to reclaim all of these territories from the gods. And so he had his apostles who went out and preached, and they actually covered all of the areas, including as far away places as Spain, that Paul said he wanted to go to reclaim these regions from the gods. And it's kind of just really fascinating stuff that he's written on. I've read a few of his books, and we were just talking a little bit about that kind of stuff.
Did he tie it to 1 Corinthians chapter 10? It says here, and I just Googled this. I actually didn't know the verse off the top of my head. So this may sound funny. I thank God for Google.
Oh, I do too. And the internet.
It's kind of a funny thing because
we'd be all in libraries right now. You wouldn't get anything done nearly as quickly if we didn't have the internet. And
but I say that these things with which the Gentiles sacrificed, they sacrificed to devils. So when they were having these pagan ceremonies to their idols, they were sacrificing to devils.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's Totally
those are the
consistent.
pagan gods. Those are the pagan gods.
And that's exactly what it is. And then he's got this idea. Michael Heiser's looked into the Nephilim, and he believes that some of the demon activity that we have on spiritual warfare that's going on, some of the demons are actually from the Nephilim, which is kind of interesting. So it's just to me, that's just, I love that kind of stuff. I think I'm super fascinated by it. I know Rob likes it too. So
I definitely do love it.
So Rob had a story.
I thought the discussion with the Nathan and London Theist was interesting. That's not my specialty. When you're talking about the various texts and Christ's, you're talking about the work of Michael Brown. That's something I'm not trained in at all. So
Yeah,
I learned
Bible
something
translations.
just listening to you all when I was listening to that.
I just think, I have this little note right here. I have something I've got. I was thinking about writing a book that's basically going to talk about Lucifer's methods of getting away from Christianity. I don't know. I haven't figured out a title yet, but I was noticing promote veganism, which is trying to go against what says in the Bible about eating meat. Promote relativism. So I see that right now with millennials in that little study I showed a little bit earlier, where millennials are saying things such as stealing and cheating and doing different things like that are more acceptable than older generations. In general, I think there's an interaction maybe if they believe in God or not, because millennials also are less likely to believe in God's importance. And then there's this idea of escalating apathy, doubt, rewriting Bible translations to mean what you want them to say rather than what they actually originally said. And then make it so that men and women are no different. There's no hierarchy. Take that one translation of the Bible, they've gotten rid of the hierarchy between men and women. And what people are doing today is it's what you identify with rather than what you are biologically gifted with. So.
And that's when I joined the YouTube, looking at it, and I was wondering what all that was, what that survey was, and these are the attitudes of the millennials.
Yeah,
that's actually very interesting. There was the book, The Naked Communist.
I haven't read that.
And it had predictions that what the Communist Party wanted to see. Now, what this have to do with culture, whether that was satanically inspired, everything that you're describing were the goals that they wanted to see for society, and it was articulated over 60
right.
years. Do you want me to? I can show you that list right now.
No, you are totally right, because I actually forgot about that. Somebody gave me a link to that, and I posted it on Twitter, but it was from like the early 1960s. Yes. There's this list of what the communists wanted, and you're right. I totally forgot about that.
Let's see.
Yeah, share it if you have a way to share it that people can see.
Yes, I'm going to put it in the private chat, and I've talked to Christian brothers what they think. They said, "Was this a conspiracy?" They all said, "No. Well, this looks like something." I think you said it. This is something the devil's doing.
Yeah.
And because no organization could be that competent to carry this out on its own power.
Exactly. I mean, just the fact that all these societies in the West are going towards this idea of Eurosecularization. That's something that we've talked about a little bit too. Is trying to get people out of the churches. And one of the ways that a lot of people use the churches because they have high levels of extrinsic religiosity. And
it might be worth. I'm just gonna. Could I share my screen too? And I put it.
Yeah. Hold on just one second. I'm trying to paste your link here. Okay, so we'll have to go to this communist thing. Okay, and then Rob says, hold on. I think you guys, Rob, and I think you and Sal might need to hash out your stuff on the YEC versus maybe at a long debate.
Then can we? Because I think you wanted to mention Bible then, because I didn't get to have my say as far as the faint young son paradox goes.
I'm
and
sorry.
That's true. I'm not saying you're being unfair. It's just, Sal, you have this mannerism of just being quite quite expressive and wordy, and not really answering the questions, especially when people outside on the chat were, like, for example, Slam gave a very good definition of the paradox. But anyway, I don't want to diverge into that. You're going to share this, so. But I would love to have a discussion. I mean, when SJ mentioned Psalm 82, I can go down the ancient Near Eastern route and showcase why you can't see dinosaurs in the Bible. Because I know young creationists use the Bible for that, and no way in any part of this universe can you make that defense. So I don't know why we're discussing this. This just seems like a total off tangent thing.
I think that we just didn't want to make this.
I'm not a rude person in dialogue. I care about peer review and data, right? I'm a Christian, by the way. I'm not an atheist. That I may have misheard, but it seems like he was insinuating that I'm an atheist.
I'm sorry if it sounded that way. I was just pointing out an atheist was conducted himself in a manner that was, I considered, more amenable to discussion. That's all.
So Nathan was
I was
doing.
pointing out he wasn't interrupting me like you were.
Sure.
And then accusing me of not answering his question. I mean,
Well,
I did my best
Nathan,
to answer it. It may not have satisfied what you required.
I know.
So I was just pointing out I'm normally very not very pugnacious like that, but
Nathan follows the. I just want to say Nathan follows the street epistemology method, which is fine, right?
So, could we talk about this in some other venue? I'd like to not bog us down in this because it could be a 5-day debate.
Well, you didn't answer. I'm just, again, it's like you're getting away with it. Like, you believe that humans and dinosaurs walk together. You didn't actually answer Ezra's question. You didn't answer my science questions. So it's like, and now you get Scots free. Like, you just walk away. Oh, let's just make it another venue.
No. If you want to bring me on your channel and grill me, I'm willing to do that. You can keep accusing me of not answering your question, and I'll just do my best. And if I don't answer it, I'll just say, okay, I didn't answer it to your satisfaction. That's fine. I'm willing.
So okay, then let's as Christians, then let's stick to the Bible. If you don't want to stick to the science, so where in the Bible are the dinosaurs?
If we, I'm just making an offer. Just try to be a little bit more orderly. If we want to discuss this, it's an important discussion, and it'll take more time than probably we have this afternoon.
But I thought we just agreed to keep it civil and on point. So that's why I thought we were still discussing dinosaurs and the Bible and so on.
Yeah. Well, do you want to carry? I would like to carry the discussion on another segment. Is that okay? We can pursue it more. Is that okay?
If that's what you want.
Trying to get away.
But
Scott.
it is.
I actually look forward to the challenge of a discussion on this.
It is.
I think it's important the other side also hear what you have to say.
It is. Take it from me. It is disingenuous to assert the pseudoscience you asserted and then just be like, all right, Rob, that's enough. Let's have it on another platform. We don't want to hear your explanation on it, or in this case, the legitimate scientific, what the scientists have concluded.
All right. What would be genuous? I mean, I made the offer to talk with you at length. Is that not genuine enough in another venue? Because I sense SJ wants to move the conversation on.
If SJ wants to move the conversation, this is why I was respecting her, and I always have, with respect to if we've nailed out all the points on this. That's why I asked her, did we finish that Psalm 22 thing? That's why I wanted to make sure that was all right, and then.
Oh yeah, no, I'd like to go back to. We can go to Psalm 22 again if you want.
All right, but it's again, this is SJ's show, right? So that's why I'm trying to honor SJ with this. That's why I'm staying quiet. But then when we're going into this tangent, it's kind of like, what on earth is this now? Like,
well, we originally were talking about Psalm 82 and Bible translations. That was our like initial focus. So I was just
Okay.
trying to get back to a little bit of that.
Yeah. Okay.
And that relates to Psalm 82 too.
And then there was the poll or something that you showed about all the things the devil's doing, and then the
Yeah.
change in millennial attitudes. I was just relating it to something that was said in 1963, but actually was articulated even earlier in the mid 50s. And so I was just relating it to something earlier in your show.
Yeah,
So-
I'm definitely going to look up to
Okay.
that, because I think there definitely is something going on. And it's interesting when the atheists were running Russia and or USSR, I guess, and were running these other places, how we did see such the church took a hit. I've got that the government's documented that here in the United States of some of the ways that Stalin was trying to destroy the churches, and so I thought that was kind of interesting, and how 120 million people died under those regimes, USSR, China, and Cambodia, and I think that that seems like it's satanic. So.
Yes, and so the list that I showed, it was talking about trying to infiltrate the churches and replace. So that this was item number 27. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity that does not need a religious crutch. Eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in schools on the grounds that it violates the principle of separation of church and state. Belittle all forms, number 31, belittle all forms of American culture and discourage the teaching of American history on the ground that it was only a minor part of the big picture. Give more emphasis to Russian history since the communists took over. Support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, mental health clinics. Number 25. Oh, I'll start with number 24. I'm sorry I'm jumping around. I was trying to get the highlights. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. Number 25. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. 26, present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. This is one that was close to mine. Control art critics and directors of art museums. Our plan is to promote ugliness, repulsive, meaningless art.
Yeah, Susan sent me a link to that before.
Yes, so I'm just gonna, this is probably worth, it struck me how this roadmap of destroying Christian culture was laid out in such detail, and we're seeing it unfold in the present day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's scary. 60 years ago, they're so prescient it's just not prescient, but they've been actively working behind the scenes. Even with the Black Lives Matter movement that was run by trained Marxists, they're trying to break down family units and family structures and saying that, people don't have to get married if they impregnate their girlfriends or something like that. And so we're seeing more fatherless families. And that's not worked out really well, because that means more poverty when people have a single parent raising them generally.
So I actually only learned about this like in the last 6 weeks or maybe 2 months. A friend in my apologetics group was talking eschatology, and I have a different eschatological position than he does, but he's pointing out this is why the world's ending. And I'm just like, okay, I may not, the Lord may tarry. We don't know. Any day he can come, or it could be much farther out. But in the process, he said, look at all the communism out there. And there's this documentary by Curtis Bowers. Have you seen it? I never saw it and this is where I learned about this list. And it did make my jaw drop, because when I saw all this going on in the United States, it's like this was predicted 60 years ago.
Yeah.
So 60, 70 years ago, so accurately. And,
yeah, it's scary.
And the one thing we all agreed on is this is not a conspiracy theory that men concocted. They said the only way this is being carried out is that there are spiritual forces at play, and men's hearts are willing to pursue these things. It says in the Psalms somewhere that the wicked will listen to lies, which I presume also means they're going to believe it. And this is exactly what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's awful. Actually, I think that I'm writing an academic paper, and I try not to get too much into it because my academics is in business. And so I want to publish in a business related journal or a sociology journal. So I try not to get too political because I know that sometimes the editors, as soon as you mention something that, suddenly their little fangs go up and it's like so hard to get things published that way. And so, but I think somehow framing that paper, bringing in some of these concepts from communism could be interesting.
So I presume you're for free markets, or do you have
Yes,
points?
I am for free markets. I'm a capitalist.
And in the business journals you publish in, are the editors free market people, or?
Oh, it's easy getting stuff published. In business, I can get anything. I mean, business people tend to be capitalist and tend to be a lot of business people in my field are centrist, but we're pretty drawn in the middle. We're not at all like some of the other academic disciplines that are completely weighted down by, 99% of people are all leaning one way politically. And, you're finding a lot of communists and Marxists. We don't find those in business. It would be, if a person comes in and is a Marxist in business, they'd probably be laughed out of the business school. So.
That's encouraging. There's at least some pockets of academia that have some level of rationality, and actually that's an interesting discussion because I've looked at some of the humanities departments, and
they're very, very far left.
It's not just left-leaning. I've read some of their peer-reviewed work, and I thought, this is insanity. I couldn't believe that any academic would say some of the things that they said is just totally decoupled. I'm just like it looked like a horror show, what I read. So yeah. It actually makes the creationists actually look good by comparison.
Yeah, no, they're coming up with
creationist old Earth, young Earth, or. Well,
it's just even, that's, I can say I've looked at, like, there's some journals out there that I think shouldn't even be on the market, but I am a free market person, so let them sit out there. But some of the stuff that people write, Jordan Peterson has done a study on the percentage of people in certain disciplines who are far left. And I'm not even talking about leaning slightly to the left. I don't have a problem with leaning slightly to the left or to the right, or whatever you are. It's just that when you get to the far left, you start adopting those ideas like what you just read off with the Communist Manifesto. And those people are dominating a lot of the humanities. And so we're definitely seeing that. Some of the arts at my school and definitely some of the hard sciences. We have more people leaning that way. But in business, absolutely not. My dean actually is a staunch Republican. My president is a marketing major who's also, I would guess, a staunch Republican. I'm pretty sure from what I've heard from behind the scenes at my school. And of course, all of the board of trustees are business people who are millionaires and Republicans, actually. So to go, we're kind of the unusual school, maybe, I don't know. But if you come into business trying to sell Marxist ideas, you're not going to go very far because somebody's going to say that it is totally inconsistent with human nature to try to tell people that no matter how hard they work, they're going to get the same money for some guy sitting on the side of the road doing nothing. It's just, people don't want to hear that. That's just not fair. And so, and not being able to perform and not having performance-related pay, that kind of stuff just would never fly in business.
I've noticed.
Go on, Rob. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've noticed. I noticed that as well, SJ. It's a very interesting phenomenon where, we have. Well, I did a bachelor's in the university that has what's called WAPA, which is Hugh Jackman. He graduated from WAPA, West Australian of Academy of Performing Arts. And I did, in my atheist years, this is between 05 and 2010, well, I guess up to like 2012, but I did sort of step in just for the sake of, I've always been, in fact, I've never been right or left. I hate labels, right? But just for the sake of observation, I've stepped into both shoes. What I found interesting about the left, specifically when you're getting with the humanities, is that I can sympathize with why they have this socialist structure. In other words, when you just mentioned, in the business model, you don't find that structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now notice that's very interesting, because the business structure is, at the end of the day, the business structure is removing the emotions that's married to the humanities. You're just seeing it as this rigid sort of structure that won't work in the so-called left scenario. But don't forget, if you're talking about human history that's written, that's, I guess you could say, like a written record for, say, the last 2,000 years. And even if you want to go even before that, but let's just say the last 2,000 years, just what humans have done, the heroes and the villains, on both sexes. Now this very ecumenical expression, like you can express how you want to express yourself, now down to the the pronouns, right? Which is Jordan Peterson had to deal with that in that Canadian sense, right? I forgot what it was called. Something bill or something. Like
C-16, I think it is.
Yeah, that. So notice it's all to do with sexuality. Notice it's all to do with sexual orientation. When you were saying, that in the hard sciences, you're sort of the way that's creeping in is sort of in this case the biological sector with respect to human anatomy, and it's just because of the way humans have been. It becomes this very kind of like this, like the whole 60s all over again. It's that free love expression everywhere. We just love the way you are. You can express yourself how you want, and then that just devolves into, ironically, back into a very animalistic society. And so in other words, that's the bedrock foundation, or the reasoning. That's what's going on in a humanities professor's mind, because he has all this background knowledge. But notice, when I've engaged them when I was on campus, I've engaged them to showcase how a very conservative sort of, this may sound non-PC, but a righteous, very narrow road, but it's also like a righteous road that is not their desires. In this case, a Judeo-Christian worldview, right? That has always come to the rescue when a left-leaning mindset happens to shoot itself in the foot. And you see this throughout history, and they don't want to admit it. So why you're seeing the way this year, or even last year, the way it was all turning out, in this case, Black Lives Matter and all the stuff that's been taking place. It's there, in my opinion, and I am conjecturing on this, but I'm saying this in hindsight of what I just said. I think ultimately it's their attempt to be the equivalent of a so-called, like, for example, to use the foundations of America as an analogy. You know how it was like the forefathers, it was a foundational thing. It was like in a way, a type of Judeo-Christian sort of religious foundation. It was a very rigid, narrow sort of foundation. So they want to do their version of that. And I hate to say this, but it's, as Jeremiah 17 says, the heart is deceitful above everything, right? And so if you're going to have a foundation that at the end of the day, you're not honest to admit that your heart is fallible, not infallible, then the foundation will have holes in it. And even if it's the tiniest hole, that hole can expand over time. And
Yeah, I agree with you as far as the 60s were kind of crazy. And it's kind of similar to how, in some ways, it's similar to how it is right now. And I feel like then the 70s were the correction. And we had like Alex P. Keaton. I always think of that show as like the epitome. And Ronald Reagan coming into office. And everyone just loved Ronald Reagan and thought he was just the greatest thing since sliced bread. And he got people back to this idea of Christianity and some other things. I mean, in his own way. But I want to say welcome to GFujigo because he wants to come on because he says he wants to give the perspective of the Christian left.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah,
SJ, it's a pleasure to be on with you, Rob and Sal. SJ, I love your channel. I think she's one of the best apologists up and coming, the people's apologist. Yeah, I was listening.
I consider SJ my aunt from another from across the world. Like.
Yeah, I just love her channel. I think it's so needed in the Christian community and in the community at large, especially if we're to reach the world for Christ. I was just listening. We on the Christian left, we're just getting beat up for a few minutes there. And I said I wanted to the Christian political left, that is, just wanted to, and the one thing that I wanted to say is, and I appreciate everybody's comments, is I think that it's definitely I always find the perspective interesting that America is entering a type of quote unquote communist slide. When you look before the 70s, before the 60s, you look at what the condition was for people of color. I mean, lynchings, murders, raping. Why wasn't that a time of great moral upheaval when all of that was legal? And so for many of us on the Christian political left, it's we can't square now things are bad. From the perspective of the Christian political left, things are so much better. I mean, we don't have to drink from certain water fountains. You can't just go lynch somebody. So I think it's very important to look at the whole picture. As a kid, when I used to read, when I read the Bible, one of the parables that stuck out to me was when Jesus said, in the last days, people would say, but Lord, I did this and that for you. But he said, when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. And then he said he was going to send them to hell. And I used to wonder, man, that seems kind of harsh for just not feeding and taking care of somebody. But as I got older, I said, man, I see why. Because like SJ, you're a parent. You love your children. You're not going to want to see anybody mistreat them and say, oh, everything is good. So that would be one question that I have.
No, those are very good points. And that tends to be one of the reasons why I see good points on the Democratic Party when it's in this moderate position. I think that they've taken some very good points to help people out and to make sure that some laws are out there, like Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's a perfect law. The laws that have come out since then, that also we've got Americans with Disabilities Act, we've got the Age Discrimination and Employment Act. We've got a lot of really good laws that have come in place since the 60s that have protected people and given people a lot of rights. And I'm speaking more like to the workplace because that's what my study is. But I agree that if you look at it from a legal perspective, it really has been very good progress that we've made in the United States and some maybe some other Western societies from a legal perspective. So
yeah,
I just want to say, Fujigo.
You can just say G. SJ is one of the few people that pronounce it right. GFujigo. But
G
yeah,
okay, I'll say G. All right. I'm going to pass this by you. When you're talking about, let's just take, for example, slavery and racism, say in the late 1800s, American slavery and racism. I find it curious that it was not the Christian right, rather it was the Christian left, the Democrats, as far as my reading is concerned, and Charles Darwin actually the reason why he comes up with this theory of a monogenesis of humans is because he's using Acts 17:26 about that one blood reference with his discovery of evolution, common descent, to showcase that there is no difference between the black man and the white man. They are of one, we're talking about cladistic species, that sort of thing, right? So I find it interesting that it was the scientists of the right and the Christians of the right, Wilberforce, all that, who were the ones that actually were opposing what you and I actually would agree on, and that is sin at the end of the day, racism, slavery, all that stuff. Not once do you see a democratic equivalent or an example take place. So in other words, the so-called, like Isaac Newton and all these so-called founding fathers of certain scientific discoveries, well, the founding fathers of, say, abolishment of slavery and racism and so on, that was of the Christian, more or less the Christian right. I'm not saying far right. I'm saying those who are more in the right, sort of more conservative side. And this is for Sal. It was the young Earth creationist model that was opposing Darwin's initial theories from a Seventh-day Adventist context, who were pro-slavery and pro-racism, and that's why Darwin had to come up with that monogenesis of humans. So that's what I find so ironic in all this. When you actually see how all the origins of these ideas, this is stuff people don't really, they don't ask that question, how did it start, then what was its evolution, and now where is it today?
That's a very interesting and good point. And it's fascinating because over the years, the ideologies have found different homes. I remember I was shocked to find out that the Civil Rights Bill passed mainly because of Northern Republicans. Democrats voted against it. And, of course, many of their ideologies have shifted. So you're right. Many of these views have been in different camps at different times, and humans evolve in their views. So that's an excellent point.
And Hellbound, just a quick comment, SJ. Hellbound says Darwin only observed the evolution of species. Yeah, sure. But look at the 2009 book called Darwin's Sacred Cause, because his family was they have an emblem of a black man, with the chains, am I my brother's keeper, that sort of thing. And so his family was staunchly anti-racist, anti-slavery. Darwin was looking for the scientific foundation for how to make that defense, and it was the creationists, which weren't actually in the early church. It was actually the creationists from the 1800s onwards that, because don't forget, the white man, the so-called Aryan race, which is now where Hitler gets that Sanskrit word from, because it's a Sanskrit word. Why do you think Hitler has that phrase? Because it was the white American Christian from that young Earth, mindset. Because if you hold to this thing called kinds, well, you have a white kind of man, and then you have a black kind of man. Oh, the white kind is closer to the image of God than the black man. And now you've just ruined the whole thing. And so Darwin was like, no. Black and white man are the same, Homo sapien.
I like that verse, Acts 17:26, which is why I put it up there. I honestly can say I've never looked at that verse quite that way. I never thought about it like with that framing. And so I think that's beautiful, because we also know we all have the same genetic parents. We all go back far enough. We're all connected to the same genetic parents.
Hence a monogenesis of humans.
And one of the things I think I heard, I want to say one of the Ravi Zacharias speakers say this, that, the only thing, now taking it back to the spiritual realm, that makes us all equal is the love of God. Because physically, we're not the same in any way. We're not equal. There's no, we're not the same individual. We don't have the same genetics, and there's nothing equal about us just based on pure physics. It's only the love of God that attaches to every single human being. And this is what Paul says in Romans, neither Jew nor Greek, nor Gentile, slave nor free, male nor female. That verse really resonates with me, and I think it's an example of the power of Christianity.
I think just to come back to you, G, I think my method, and I wrote a Facebook post on this it's still up in the air, so to speak. By the way, I'm neither pro-Trump nor pro-Biden. I couldn't care less.
He lives in Australia, so he doesn't have to pick.
Yeah. But I did write a blog post, and I did also make a 4-hour live stream on the Christian response using Romans 13 about what about if we had another Hitler 2.0? Do we just start rioting and so on? No. Paul's point is no. Because at the end of the day, whether it's through nefarious means or through legitimate means, God, in his providence, is allowing that guy to, for that period of time, to rule. You see this throughout the Bible, the pharaohs, Babylonian context, Nebuchadnezzar. Like, you see tyrants in history, and then God utilizing them not only as a picture of his graciousness and his love, but also, ironically, those same tyrants sort of have a self-reflection about themselves, both bad and good. So let God be God. And in other words, like what Paul says, 1 Timothy 2, petitions, prayers to all people, including those in authoritative places. So when Jesus tells Pilate, my kingdom is not of this world, but if it was, my servants would be fighting to keep it. So since he's saying my kingdom is not of this world, again, as Christians, we should be kind of like Hebrews 12, a cloud of witnesses, in the heavenly, so to speak. That's our citizenship is in heaven, Philippians 3, right? So then I can't then put myself either in a right bracket or a left bracket. That's where I'm going with this. So my question to you is, why are you left? Because I could easily ask the same person who's right. Why are you right? As a Christian, you should be neither. That's the biblical model.
I see what you're saying, and that's a really, really good question. Actually, my personal views, I don't necessarily think when I say that I'm part of the Christian political left, I don't think the political left has an exclusive claim to being right, just like I don't think the political right has an exclusive claim to being right. I think good ideas are found in conservative and liberal ideologies. And so my primary identity is as a Christian. I agree with many of the, not all, but I agree with many of the, policy positions. Like I'm a big believer in healthcare for all, giving kids, I'm really touched about maternal infant mortality and things like that. So these are things, civil rights, justice, those types of things matter to me a lot. I actually think it's good for a country to have a balanced society where sometimes you have more conservative leadership, sometimes you have more liberal leadership. I don't even mind a balanced Supreme Court. I just think that, so that's why, primarily because of that. But, as like you look at SJ and I disagree politically, but I think she's a wonderful person, and I don't let that view allow me to view, I don't let political views lead me to view people as bad or anything like that. It's more a sense of, and I think that, like, even when it comes to business, like, there are definitely good views, good things about capitalism, but we don't live in a purely capitalistic society, or else they wouldn't run to the government every time the banks crash because they got in trouble doing bad things. They wouldn't come to the government to bail them out. If they were pure capitalists, the system would just collapse. So, there are good ideas all over the place.
I just want to say, GFujigo, I actually agree with you on a lot of points. I've always been for universal health care. And so that's one of my democratic leanings. It's that definitely is. But on the other hand, I'm also against abortion, and I've become increasingly against abortion as I've grown in my Christian faith. Because I think of it, I look at, there's 1% of abortions are incest or rape, but the other 99%, a lot of those are people just electing to have an abortion out of convenience.
Right.
And those are the ones that I'm kind of like, let's not talk about the 1% so much, or maybe give those rights, but make it a little bit more difficult for people just to go around using that as birth control, which I feel that they're.
I share SJ's.
And I agree with you on that.
I agree with SJ on that as well. But I do want to ask SJ, since you're a woman in this as well. So a very close friend of mine, Christian, she was going to have triplets. This was nearly 2 years ago. They were trying and trying and trying. They had many miscarriages, and then boom, suddenly triplets. And then, I think 6 months into the pregnancy, one of the babies was able to break through and caused a rupture, and then but it basically septic, all that stuff. It could go down that track, right? And in other words, the other two were completely fine and safe, but because of that one that sort of broke open, not only would the other two die, but also the mother. So the doctors, I mean, it was also through private Christian medical practice and so on, and they all said, look, at the end of the day, even if we take this one out, all of you are going to die. Because of the complications. So the best solution is to abort all three. And it was a very hard decision, but that's what she did. So like that's, you see, this is the gray area, right? This, like, I don't want to put you on the spot, but like I, for one, would definitely put it on the throne of grace, Hebrews 4, and let God handle it. But I would agree with her decision in that, as far as what's the maximal chance of life to come out of this, and it just happens to be her.
Mom was in that situation with my sisters. We were in a third world country, and again, these are third world doctors. When Mom was pregnant with my sisters, and she went through this twice, she had hyperemesis. She has a problem eating. Even now, every now and then she'll go through a phase where food just makes her sick. And she said even the smell of food, so she couldn't eat, she'd just start vomiting. And so the doctor is the one taking care of her. Now, this is, again, an example of bad medicine, but she was they basically said, well, just abort the child and Mom will live. And Mom and Dad said, well, we'll just put it in the Lord's hands. And I think a lot of mothers would say, well, if there is a chance, they'll take it. That if they die, they'd rather risk their life for their child. And that's the decision Mom faced. And so my sister was born. She went through it again with my second sister, and that was worse. And they described to Dad, the procedure of abortion. They said at that late term, they said, well, they're going to have to cut all the limbs inside the baby. Mom and Dad said, definitely not. So 12 years later, when I was born, we had a different doctor who was wiser and just gave IVs, and it alleviated the symptoms. That was the easiest pregnancy, but definitely, given the limited knowledge that they had, it seemed the only option was life or death. That it didn't occur to them maybe get another doctor. I mean, that's how it is sometimes when you're under really stressful situations and you're trusting all the information you're getting. So I totally understand how difficult when Rob related the triplet situation. That's really tough.
I empathize with your mom too. And
that might be the only point where I would say, this is where I leave it in the Lord's hands and the decision of the mother. But I'm presuming a lot of mothers who
Yeah.
they probably say, let me go down with my kids. Just the thought.
Yeah, and that's what she wanted to do as well. And but at the same time, yeah, I mean, her husband, who's again a close friend, like he would have been, I think he would have died as well, just out of broken heart if she did pass away. So she's actually this may sound, I don't know how this will sound to others who may hear this, but she's actually the biggest hero in this whole thing. I'm not saying hero in the sense that she's killing her kids. It's in other words, she's the one that, for the sake of her husband as well, like she took on a lot of sacrifice onto herself, is what I'm saying. Where the children passed, but so she could stay alive, and then for her to be with the husband. And like in other words, at the end of the day, she's having not only to physically endure all this, but also emotionally, psychologically. Yeah, she demonstrated she was just one tough cookie in that sense. And I mean, I don't want to say it, I don't want to get graphic. I don't know if it's similar to the situation of Sal with respect to your mom, but that one of the triplets that broke loose, basically she could see the hand come out. Let's put it that way. And that, then she had to rush out to the hospital. And
Wow. So I want to ask you, I mean, I would say I would agree with Sal on this whole thing is leave it to the mother on a case where it's a life or death situation. But I'm just wondering, the one thing is, was there any possibility of delivering, just like inducing delivery at that point at 6? Because is there a chance at 24 weeks that the babies could survive outside of the womb?
Was that in the case of?
I think it's in Rob's case, because you said it was six months, and I'm just wondering.
Because I'm not familiar with the cycle and the progression and all but all I know is it was I don't know, it was like a nice edge of they could have survived outside, but it's that if they just stayed another maybe a few more weeks, I don't know, then they may have survived. Like it was literally just before the race, before crossing the line, right? The earliest threshold that you could give a birth to, right? They were still before that, but at the same time, they were still formed enough to look human, and so
I've what I've seen, the consistent pro-life position is that since, and SJ, what do you think about this? That the goal is not to kill the children, but to preserve the life. So that would be the consistent position. It's not like it's say, oh, we're just having fun and I'm just going to get rid of them because I don't want them. Yeah. The goal is, we have a life-threatening situation. The goal is to preserve life. And unfortunately, in that situation, the preservation of life, the unintended consequence is that, human persons are lost.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And just quickly, I think I know what you mean. Are you saying that they could do like a quick sort of like induce labor and induce?
Because babies can be viable at 20 weeks.
Yeah.
So that's.
I think that option was on the table, but as far as I remember, I think they may have done that. But as far as I remember, they had to work quick because she could have died overnight. That's how quick it was.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I also think that human persons are so important. One of the things I think about, there's a country right now, I forget which one, is it Iceland or someplace, wherein babies are virtually automatically aborted if they have Down syndrome.
Yes, it is Iceland.
Like that. And I can't help but think that there are several issues there, but where would we be as a society if we just decided, number one, to just abort kids all over the place? Why stop at Down syndrome? Maybe they're not going to be that football player I wanted. Maybe they're too small. But also, more importantly, where would we be if, because of the presence of human persons suffering different diseases, I think that we would be learning so much more about humanity, about nature, about how to, push forward, solve the problems we face and whatnot. And I think that, I'm concerned that this tailor-made approach to human life might result in some of these macabre situations we see in sci-fi movies.
I totally agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, I'll tell you on my own story really quickly. I don't know if you've heard this before, but when I was pregnant with my second son, I was 38 years old at the time, and I was obviously very worried about Down syndrome. And so I decided I was definitely going to get the amniocentesis. And I actually recently had to go back and double check exactly which week I went to get the amniocentesis. I was thinking it was around week 12, but actually it was around 15 weeks. And so I saw this fully formed little baby inside of me. And they said, oh, he's got 2 soft markers for Down syndrome. He has echogenic heart and echogenic bowels. But don't worry, you can just terminate the pregnancy. And I was like, what? I'm not going to kill my baby. I don't care if he's born with Down syndrome. I went back home. I spent, until I got the results back about a week or so later. I went and I got online and I studied what it was going to be like to be a Down syndrome mom. And I made that decision. But I remember my family members, across the board saying, not my husband was totally behind me. He would never want to do that either. But as far as my family members, including one of my siblings, was like, well, I think I would have gotten the abortion if I found out that he had Down syndrome. And he was born without Down syndrome. The results came back and he's a healthy little kid. But I think you do start playing God when you go around saying, hey, this baby isn't good enough. Let's just go ahead and do that, because that's not it's not what we're made for. I want to say I can probably go about till about 1:45, guys. I can't go too much longer.
Yeah, I just want to say, SJ, to end it on a more happy note with my friend. By the way, I linked her Facebook profile if you want to, I guess, lurk around and see what's happened since. But they do have a young girl now, so they were able to she was able to get pregnant again, and she gave birth. So that's their first child.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
that's really good. Yeah, that's the thing. So when they told me that, that's also something where you really, because my very first pregnancy was a miscarriage, but it was kind of an early miscarriage. I think I was about 10 weeks or so. I wasn't that far along, and or maybe I was maybe less than that. Might have been more like 8 weeks or something. But then the second pregnancy, I was so appreciative because I just was so happy that it was going to work out. And then the third one was with the son with the potential for Down syndrome that he didn't end up having. But you just become I was pro-choice before they said that to me. I actually had delivered a friend of mine in my 20s. I drove her to an abortion clinic to have an abortion because she accidentally got pregnant and with somebody that she was dating, briefly and all this stuff. And so I was like that. And then as soon as I get pregnant myself, that changed me. I just completely changed my opinions. But I also don't try to force my legislation on other people. I just try to encourage people as much as I can not to have the abortion.
Yeah, I think is that one of Stephanie Connors Gray, or Stephanie Gray Connors, talks about that, making life, making people want life, and instead of that's what her ministry is focused on, doing a lot of that. That she, great debater on that issue of life.
Yeah, it's just it's so valuable, and I think that's all we can do is just really try to promote it. We do have, I have to say, just to mention something from our political system, but I absolutely love Amy Coney Barrett, by the way. I wish we could have her be our president. I mean, she is such a class act, and so that's one thing I have to say. When Trump nominated her, I thought to myself, okay, Trump did do something good. He got this wonderful woman who's just, I think they tried to probably drag her through the mud, but they couldn't find anything on her. Here she's got 7 kids, 2 adopted, and a little child with Down syndrome. I mean, she's, as far as I'm concerned, she's batted it right out of the park and beat us all.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's one of the things that I truly believe. Even if I disagree with somebody politically, I can recognize that this person is, profound, qualified, definitely a great humanitarian. Anybody who adopts, in my opinion, you're taking on children you don't have to. That says a lot about character. and she seems intelligent and very smart. And so I don't lose sleep over her appointment. I think.
I have to agree. I mean, I just think of her, and also just to say, I agree with you on this adoption idea, because here she already had 5 kids. That's a lot of kids. I can barely handle 2. I remember when I turned 40, I said to my husband, should we try for a 3rd? And he's like, do you want to get a divorce? Because that's what's going to happen.
Wow.
Sounds pretty funny.
That's funny.
Well, so you guys want to make some closing points? Or just oh, you're welcome. You're always welcome. Does anyone want to make some closing points, or anything you want the audience to know about yourself, or where they can find you, or anything like that?
Well, I mean, one day I'm going to start a YouTube channel. Just want to let everybody know, hey, I'm praying for them. I think, no matter where we are politically, the last, best, and greatest hope for mankind is in Jesus the Christ. God bless.
Amen. Yeah, we share that. Who wants to go next?
A big thumbs up to G. I wholeheartedly agree, and that's pretty much it. I especially to Sal as well. No hard feelings, and definitely, like I said, earlier on the stream, I consider your brother in Jesus.
Thank you. Likewise.
Yeah. I hope you can see I'm coming from an atheist background, so I don't have any patience anymore with what I call paleobabble. Paleobabble, because I see this in every spectrum, whether you're talking about ancient aliens, all the Jesus mythicists, there's just so much pseudoscience everywhere. And I hate to say this, but that's why I also wanted to. It was brought up when G was on, but like when you look at the early history of young creationism, it actually was pro-slavery, pro-racism, and it had its origins in the mythical visions of Ellen G. White. And yeah, I would love to have a discussion with you in regards to what the Bible is, and why we should just leave it the way it is, not just shoehorn in stuff that we think is there. And then at the same time, if you want, we can then also talk about, say, the scientific stuff. But definitely don't feel that I was trying to I definitely wasn't trying to be rude to you. And a lot of people, especially in the live chat, will know that I'm quite cordial in these discussions. It's just that I like to get straight to the point as well, and yeah. So I hope I apologize if it came out, if you misunderstood my intentions in that sense. So yeah.
I want to say really quickly, Rob has debated Aaron Ra. I don't know if you know who Aaron Ra is, Sal, but I actually have to go back and watch more of that debate. I did see part of it. It's good stuff.
I'm impressed anyone would try to debate him. A lot of these short debates are theater, and that's why they're a nuisance I have to do every now and then just to show that I'm willing to engage the other side. But theater is not kind of the way that I try to engage the topics. Like I said, there are these online debates that have lasted 2 years. They're very, very, very methodical, where we'd be citing experiments and papers and examining it and working through the math. So the idea of being direct to the point, it's like, well, do we mean treating ideas so superficially that we never actually get to the important details? And that can be viewed as being verbose, but that is, when we do forensic court cases, it's not a matter of being superficial. It's actually getting down into very specific, very highly technical details. So it's not an issue of me trying to evade or being disingenuous or trying to get away. I know that's why I said very early on that if people want debates, I'll say 5 days, 5 days. And then, we could have days off in between because these are, it can't be summarized in such a small space of time to explain things unless someone is a specialist. And then I could articulate things very tersely, but the audience would definitely not understand anything that I'm saying. So I want to thank you for having me on the channel, and I would hope I'd love to visit back again. And thank you for having me yesterday.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
Yes, so I'm happy to talk about other things, and I appreciate Rob's invitation to discuss, and we can work that out. I'm happy to clear my schedule to talk about that in another venue than this one. So this was I was a little distracted because I had to step in and out. So I guess we're making our sales pitch for any of our work or anything. I have a YouTube channel that I'm just starting to build out, and it's called people can access it through the website, which actually isn't well built, www.evidenceandreasons.org. And if they go to that website, there'll be a link to the YouTube channel, and there'll be interviews, and then also me talking biology. I have a heart for the biology students, and I'm also trying to teach a little physics and biochemistry and molecular biology too. And not that I'm doing it by myself. I'm working with the university professors who teach in secular schools who are young Earth creationists. So
great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you should. That sounds really good. That you guys will talk again and get all that stuff hashed out. And so I'm sure that'd be an interesting conversation. And I would actually think that what might be the most interesting out of that, just for the lay person like myself, might be to watch how you hash out Genesis in from the old Earth perspective versus a young Earth perspective. I think that could be super interesting. And so I think that would probably get a lot of Christian viewers on your channel if you guys do it on Rob's channel or whatever. But I also want to let you know, Sal, I'm going to actually put you in the description in my just always description. So what I mean is I'm going to link your channel, and then every time I have a description in my video, I've got a link to all these other Christian channels so that people can go to it.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, everybody, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Thank you.
Amen.
Okay, so I'm going to